This sitting is resumed. Prior to the suspension for lunch, this Honourable Chairman was debating the Appropriation Bill 2026. We return to the Appropriation Bill 2026.
This House is now in standing Finance Committee. Honourable Member for St. George South.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, let me congratulate the ministry, Minister and your team for the excellent work that you are doing. And Mr. Minister, you know, you and I, we have a bond. When it came to public life, I think you were probably the first non-minister that walked into my office, and from that day, we did a lot of work in starting the trust loans, and also the member for BNSI as well, who worked with me tirelessly to restructure BNSI. So I'm familiar with the role, but I want to focus on, I'll ask a few questions related, but I want to focus on sub-program 0311, GovTech. And while we know the role of GovTech is to modernize government services using technology, and I heard this morning you spoke and you passed on to the head of GovTech, and I heard the person outline I would say not an in-depth strategy, but some details as to what GovTech will be doing, but we didn't get into the estimates, what have been done, the details, you know, what is in the execution, what you have achieved thus far. And I see you have increased your vote from the revised estimates, and I always look at the revised. It is approved, yes, but you had an approval of 5.5 million and you revised it to 8.23 million. That's last year, 2025, 2026. But you have moved now to 33.1 million, close to an increase of $25 million. And while I know the role of GovTech, I would like you to let the Parliament know what we have achieved thus far, because this is a relatively new arm of your ministry and of government, what you have achieved thus far, and indeed, what are your plans for this financial year with this increase of 25 million, close to 25 million? That's my first question.
Thank you so much for that, Minister. And you shared a little personal anecdote, and I appreciate the warm greeting. Obviously, I'm going to defer to the CEO of GovTech to give more specifics around the operations, but just to set a little bit of context, the reality is that GovTech was a brand new agency, different from BNSI or BIDC, so there is no infrastructure that was in place. You had effectively one person who was appointed to the role of CEO, and you had a board, and that person had to actually stand up an entity with the capacity to deliver a very significant mandate of digitally transforming initially the government of Barbados and its services, and then getting obviously to full digital transformation of the country. That is a heavy mandate, and something that the ministry had obviously previously had, Ministry Central that is previously had a strong role in, and will continue to have a policy, and in some instances, quite frankly, operational role, but the specific agency with that purpose and remit was brand new. So the CEO will go in much more detail regarding the specification of what he's done and build out on the future plans. But before he does, I just want to cap the fact that, and I want to drill down to this reality. There is a direct correlation with the amount of things that you can digitize and the amount of expenditure you put towards that thing. It's a direct relationship. So the amount of people that you hire, the teams, the skills, the time that you can allocate to digitize the service, whether it's, I don't know, the court records or electric license for driver's license or something related to agriculture, You effectively have to set up a capacity in terms of teams to be able to work on that, and the amount of things you can digitize is related to the amount of investment you put in. So with that kind of overview, and I could come back afterwards if necessary, but Mark, would you dive in a little bit more, please?
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the question. So as the minister said, GovTech was formally established in 2023, but I came in place as CEO and employee number one in the second half of 2024. Our first delivery team was not actually established until 2025. So 2025 was really the year of laying some foundations, and 2026 will be the year of acceleration, which is why you're seeing the big increase in funding. Since the team has come together, we have launched alpha.gov.bb, which is a new single front door for government services that will eventually replace the existing online presence, which is gov.bb. We have launched a reusable platform for digitizing paper-based government forms, so this will allow us to substantially accelerate the rate at which we can take PDF forms and offline documents and turn them into forms that are fit for purpose online. We have developed a service catalog of most, I won't say all, of government services. We have a listing of almost 900 of them provided by permanent secretaries across various ministries, departments, and agencies. That gives us a better picture of what government does for citizens. We launched a series of surveys, including an in-person survey that we did ourselves at various highly trafficked areas in Barbados, an online survey that attracted more than 700 responses, and also a representative survey of about 1,200 people in Barbados. And the point here was to understand what is it exactly that citizens want from government services, what they thought was lacking and what could be improved. And that is helping to guide our roadmap for what we do in 2026. We've identified from those surveys a number of ministries, departments, and agencies that stand out from the citizens' point of view as priorities. And we are now in the process of speaking to the respective department heads and also ministers. Many of the people in this room may have received correspondence from us already, to meet and make sure that what we are thinking and what we have heard from citizens is also in line with the priorities of the heads and the ministers, because we are here to support the initiatives that the ministries are undertaking. We're not here to step on toes. We are aware that there are digital transformation initiatives that are already being undertaken throughout government, and our role is to support those initiatives in a number of ways. We've delivered 12 citizen-facing services on alpha.gov.bb that span 7 ministries, and we've launched a pilot with the registration department of an open source civil registration and vital statistics system. We will see what path the registration department takes if they go with full implementation, but either path, either way they go, we will be prepared to support them. So for 2026, we have ambitious goals. We are trying to release at least 100 citizen-facing digital services using this rapid form deployment platform that we have, based on the impact of those services, so based on priority of government and also how often those services are used by citizens. We will select 10 or so services for deeper end-to-end transformation. So not simply putting a form online, but also fundamentally rethinking how the service works from a citizen's perspective. Those talks are already underway. And we'll also be building out a number of digital components to support the deployment of these services at scale. So these are the kinds of things that citizens won't see, but they are the foundational elements that will allow us to to move at pace. To do that, we, as you have pointed out, will need substantially more funds. So we started out with about 5 million. It went last year to about 8, and now it's jumped to about 33. The GovTech team, as the minister said, in 2024, and for a substantial part of 2025 was just me. Now we have 27 people at GovTech. By the end of this fiscal year, I expect that number to jump to more than 150. So we're going to be on a rapid recruitment drive to support the rapid initiatives that we're undertaking.
Just before you come back in, it's also important that some of the work that we discussed earlier, which is a little bit more technical, and I'm minded to language in a way that is easy to understand. But we have, in addition to the e-services work that GovTech is doing, GovTech is also the parent of a partner that we have that is developing our deep tech and deep infrastructure capability. So the mini data center that I spoke of comes from the GovTech's budget for this partner. The development of things regarding that links our databases together in a way that wasn't developed before comes through this partner. I'm trying to find the language that is not too technical, but those listening who know technical things will get it. The APIs in effect means that instead of having narrow data, having to share data sets over and over and over again and doing repetitive tasks, the systems will talk to each other. So you have to build a system that allows systems to talk to each other in a way that they didn't before. So the infrastructure around that is being built out of the relationship, which is under the GovTech's agency. So there's a lot of foundational work to add to what Mark is saying, that the citizens don't see, that everything else rests on top of, that we've spent a year getting ready. And all of this will come into a lot of fruition over the next financial year.
Thank you, Minister. It would be good to utilize some GIS publications to let the citizens know, because one of the things that someone said to me, that government needs some more digital portal for citizens, and I know that's some of the work that you're doing to build those out. My follow-up question related to GovTech. While I sat in a former chair for some time, I know one of the bugbears within that Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance was land transactions. And I know we met a few times looking at an e-conveyance system. And I heard you this morning speaking on transport and with respect to the senior minister and the work that your ministry have to do as it relates to that Ministry of Transport. There are no silos in here. So I just want to know where we are with respect to the e-conveyance system, because I know a lot of that heavy lifting resides with your ministry. So I would just like to get an update as to where we are with modernizing and making more user-friendly and easier and reducing the cost of conveyancing in this country through your ministry.
Thank you for that. Well, so you know some of the background, but for the purpose of expanding, this is one of the things that requires multiple technology interventions that perhaps didn't exist 10 years ago, and here's the opportunity to do something that will allow us to leapfrog the way we do business. So the land registry has records dating back to the 1600s, and they've kept those records in reasonably good conditions for the most part. And at some point in time, they would have scanned copies of those records. So you imagine large land plots and other pieces of paper that they have scanned, and they have, in effect, PDFs of those documents. What they didn't have at the time, and in some ways still don't have, is what is called optical character recognition software, so OCR software, to be able to read off these scanned pieces of paper to know what's actually on the paper, and then put in a database that makes it smart for us to be able to do business. So they have scanned copies, they have effectively what is called digital surrogates of paper-based records, but they are not smart, they just live as PDFs. So we've struck up a relationship, well, started with you, but it's really mushroomed since then, quite frankly, with the new head of land registry on working with them to, one, OCR all of their scanned copies. And we're in process of, Alex Kellman, who is in the chamber, and if necessary, I'll ask him to speak, but I could probably speak through it, is leading the largest digitization project that the government is managing, which is the archival project. And so we've come up with technology that allows you to scan records at a very large scale and then extract the data from it to be able to make it a smart database. Once we've done that, the manualized process of now doing transactions in terms of doing searches and all those things will be much more automated. In fact, in many instances, it'll be as close to instantaneous as this. It'll be a searchable key, quite frankly, right? That whatever the land registry decides, they can give permission to be able to search. That then is concurrent project to actually mapping out and registering land lots in Barbados. Only, you know this, only 10% of the lots that are, I think it's 12%, only 12% of land lots in Barbados are actually been registered. So there needs to be a manualized process where, quite frankly, quite a number of people will have to go to individual lots working with surveyors to then move the unregistered amount of land in Barbados, which is about 80% of the land lots, to become registered. That way, if you have the digitized database plus the land records registered, it will get as close as possible to instantaneous land transactions. We think that the registration process, on the basis of what the registry is saying to me, is about an 18 to 36-month project because it's very manual. You have to go into the field, you have to do things. The OCR and the digitization process, it'll take us weeks, to be honest, once we finalize the arrangements on it. So I don't want to speak to matters that are obviously largely embedded with a different ministry, but we understand our role around the technology part to making it go very, very quick. And so we are in middle of it, and quite frankly, by the end of this financial year, I think we would have made astronomical progress on this area.
All right, I will hold for now, and I'll return later, hopefully. Thank you, Minister, and your team, and just keep the good work up and keep the passion.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And the question that I have for the Honourable Minister relates to something that could likely touch and concern the ministry that I have the honor to lead as well. Now, in the manifesto of the party that now constitutes the government, a number of new areas were mentioned. New areas in terms of industries, digital, bioscience, pharmaceutical, life science, logistics, a number of things like that. My question to the ministry and the minister, given what I think the Honourable Member for St. George South spoke to just now about government not siloed, what plans do you have at this point? They may not be fully fleshed out, but what are your thoughts, what are your plans with respect to engaging the relevant ministries? How do you see it working? So that as these new areas are established, that you have the worker force, the workers to be able to both take advantage of the opportunities, but also to move what will start as embryonic, to move embryonic forward and to develop it.
Minister, thank you for that question. So in my opening, I had to speed through a little bit because obviously I was taking up a little bit too much time. But the area that I wish I had the opportunity to elaborate a little bit more in this framework of a year of better is really around the idea of, I use the term better talent and better skills, but it's really around evolved and extended talent and evolved and extended skills. And the idea of there are things that we have done well for a long period of time that has served us well, and we should become even better at those, right? So matters related to tourism, food processing, we discussed a lot of these things this morning. Financial services, we are very strong and done well at those things. There are things that are within our orbit to also become very good at, and that we want to press ahead and really develop a pipeline of high quality world-class talent that could take advantage of these opportunities. An area of immediate and deep interest, and quite frankly, obvious advantage we could take forward of is really around science and life sciences. The second largest intake of students by the University of the West Indies Cable campus is in the Faculty of Science. Many people go into the Faculty of Science, I think the numbers are close to 1,000 a year, because their intent, the most competitive program is your medical sciences program. People don't get into medical sciences, they go into science. The intention is to transfer from biology or chemistry and eventually go over to the medical sciences. Intake is only 40 a year, so you have a lot of people matriculating out or dropping out of science, quite frankly, over a period of time, and this is a high area of interest for young Barbadians. But we don't have enough jobs in that area to then consume that workforce once they leave the university. We want to fix that, and we want to take advantage of that. So how do we anchor our life sciences industry to the work that the university is doing, to the work that BCC is doing, to the work that HDP is doing, and through Minister Husbands, transforming the curriculum and transforming the relationship between those entities and industry to create the talent to create high-quality jobs and high-quality opportunities for young Barbadians. That's paramount for how we're thinking about it. Even in our own infrastructure, we're building out a facility near Pelican. We call it the Giga Institute, where we're thinking about industrialization from the preschool level all the way up to the secondary school level. How can we have cobots, and how can we have Raspberry Pi, and how can we have compute available for youngsters who want to learn how to use these tools to get them ready for jobs of the future? We're building that out right now. So the talent pipeline is top of mind for us. Now, regarding the other part of your question, the reality of MISS, I would hazard a guess to say 50% of what MISS does is being a team player. That's the point of the ministry, is a facilitator of what other ministries want to get done. So if the senior minister of infrastructure is going after a project for thinking about how to manage the build-out of a new road, and you could use IoT sensors or BNSI's lab to have better quality bitumen and all those things, our role is to be a team player in that progress, and that extends to all the ministries, right? So I think all of the members in here have deep experience with us assisting with things, and we want to get much better at that. So how can we be a place where the overall standard for scientific, industrial, and technological talent lifts the country forward, and then we have a workforce that is of high quality to drive the country forward, but specifically driving the government's capability forward in an age where it's dominated by so much technology. We are consumed by that. So we spend a lot of time with the University of the West Indies. We spend a lot of time with the BCCs and the HDPIs of the world. We spend a lot of time with training institutes, getting people on board in a more dynamic way. I'll end by not going too long by saying this team at the ministry could attest to this. Last week, 2 weeks ago, I said to them, listen, if the country is to go forward in digital advancement and scientific advancement, this ministry has to be the most scientific and digitally advanced entity in the Eastern Caribbean, by far. That means everybody in here has to be an 8 to 9 out of 10 on science and tech, all of us. And some of us are 2 out of 10 or 3 out of 10 on different categories, and we work along with you to get you up to the level where it's the highest level in this country. But at the same time, we're going to have to recruit new skills in. We're going to have to bring in people who have that standard, so we do things concurrently. So we are consumed and obsessed about the idea of lifting the standard of talent that is required in these new endeavors to drive the government and drive the country forward.
Thank you very much. I take it, you mentioned some institutions, but I take it that by the mention of the institutions, you are also referring to engagement with the actual ministries where the policy is set. The institutions you mentioned were, from my recollection, all tertiary. I'd suggest that the Ministry of Educational Transformation, because I think curricula at the secondary level will also need to take into consideration the vision that your ministry has. Additionally, the ministry that I have the honor to lead which is the one that sets the people development policy, will also need to know. So while we are working together and while you are facilitating other ministries, you are also to a pretty significant degree setting the tone, informing some of the rest of us as to where you see the future. And I know that your permanent secretary is fully versed in the area of people development and what is required to make sure that happens. Along the same line of working together, I'm thinking now very parochially about two resource centers that we have in St. Peter, the one in Speightstown and one in Black Bess. And wondering if there is any intention to collaborate, say, with the ministry responsible for community development, under whose aegis I think those, not community centers, but resource centers fall. That is to say, centers with computers in them. How are you working or intending to, with respect to the matter of making sure that people at the level of the community are able to beef up their skills and take advantage of the opportunities that this digital world provides?
Thank you, Minister. I mean, to go back to your first part of your comment, the Minister of Education Transformation could attest about the close nature with we work with. Personal friend of mine, but also the mandate that he carries, I think, I would say perhaps is the only thing that I think would trump the digital mandate that I carry in terms of his ability to transform Barbados in a short period of time. So a lot of our thought process, and we share on a personal level as well as a professional level, connecting the ethos of what we're doing and the actual deliverables of what we're doing. So that's well in hand. And I was also going to tease you and say, well, you know, my permanent secretary is well borrowed from your ministry. So you understand that the DNA of everything that we're doing is around people development and job protection centered. So you were unfair me a little bit, but I'll share to the public that, you know, my permanent secretary is former chief labor officer. So it's all we're doing is very much in the mind of the things that your ministry holds near and dear. You never have to worry about that. Regarding your question regarding community centers, earlier member asked a similar question, and we are fully committed to that. The idea of whole of nation development and reaching people where they are. Our idea is really around building out the idea of a third sector relationship around community-based training and community-based learning. Some of the work that we will evolve Future Barbados, for instance, is to be focused really much more kind of on impact innovation, meeting people where they are. So again, we are all ready to collaborate with anyone who's ready to deliver programs. And so first we go to Ms. Shortman's constituency, and then we come to you.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I have another question, but it is unrelated, and I will keep my flag up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. I will keep you noted in the order that you have the flag up. Thank you. Honourable Member for St. James South.
No. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you so much for the presentation that you made this morning in relation to where it is you want to see Barbados and see our enterprises and our nation in terms of transformation and being fit for purpose for a new era that really is unfamiliar to many, many Barbadians. And you spoke earlier about the benefits in relation to how technology will transform the convenience and efficiency of government services and therefore reduce a lot of the irritants that we experience as citizens. And we certainly look forward to it. The other side of that coin, I believe, was touched on earlier but I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into the opportunities that are available for Barbadians to participate in the transformation from an economic viewpoint. For example, when you were speaking about solar and looking at the biofuels that you would use alongside of the solar, it brought to mind a problem that the nation has, which is a lot of overgrown lots across the country that we can't get owners to cut and take care of. And I was wondering if you had a solution where we could incorporate those opportunities to help us create avenues for young entrepreneurs to be able to engage that space. I'm only using that as an example. What I want to hear would be all of the nooks and crannies within the changes that you're making that will provide opportunities for Barbadians to be a part of it, to earn, to transform, and to feel like they are a part of the Barbados that is going forward.
So thank you for that, Minister. So I'll use your example and I'll bookend two things. For instance, we would have spoken quite a bit about the Food Science Center and food processing as an area of using technology, both industrial and digital, for creating new opportunities and new economic empowerment for Barbadians and Barbadian businesses. So I'll use a couple of the examples, and I'll also ask Mark Hill to dive in more specifically around the energy economy and how we're thinking about the energy economy. Again, mindful that we're not the Ministry of Energy, but it's a fundamental feedstock in everything else that we're doing. There's an example that I cited earlier, and I'll go in a little bit more detail about it. But a former, still young, he's 28, member of Future Barbados, and one of the things that I had difficulties with when I took up the role is understanding estimates. I mean, it's a complicated framework of sub-programs and programs and all those things, and the ability to manage the delivery and the management of the budget live was a thing that I felt that we could help solve this problem. And Christian Payne and his company were contracted to do some research and development around the solution. And his company built, quite frankly, a high-performance solution that we use every day to manage the budget assigned to us by the Ministry of Finance, to the point where you know, Minister, we presented as recent as, I think it was last week or week before, to the Cabinet and made it available to the other Cabinet ministers for their usages and the other ministries for their usages. And so the point was using the ministry as a catalyst for unlocking indigenous talent to create products that is both valuable locally and could be valuable globally. And that's fundamentally what we want this ministry to be in. One pillar could be around technology, but there are plenty of other opportunities ranging in science or industry and all types of things. Our point is, how do we catalyze a next generation of ideas, a next generation of doers, to build things with the government as a platform to create that first de-risking of the solution and then scale to other places. Mark, I'll have you speak a little bit more about the energy component as well.
Yeah. So, thank you, Minister. So we drill down into the science behind electrons and the opportunities that it opens up. In terms of the amount of installers, for example, that opportunities will be opened up to is significant. One of the key things that we would note that with the data and digital infrastructure, the primary skill sets that AI will not touch or remove is electricians and plumbers. So in terms of those skill sets that we want to see develop in a significant way, we would be encouraging a lot more training in the area of engineering, civil engineering, so we can see a whole suite of high skill, better paid entrepreneurs, not just simply persons collecting biomass or collecting waste from a logistics standpoint, but we really want to see the entrepreneurs get into the science, the chemistry, get into the physics behind it, so we have more scientific firms emerging. One of the things that you will see from UV, University of West Indies, is that we can see very clear down the future that in every Barbadian household, we may very well have a scientist in every household. And what that may lend itself to is unlocking new levels of innovation, new levels of discovery, new levels of research and development. So we think that there's significant scope for entrepreneurs, both on the solar side and on the biohydrogen side, but especially when it comes to discovery, new innovations and inventions. I think that this is creating an ecosystem for a lot of that to emerge. Thank you very much.
One of the challenges that I recognize that we have in Barbados is that very often the people who need to know about the opportunities don't. And in relation to, for example, the Future Center Trust, Future Barbados? Sorry, didn't get that right. But I have encountered young people in Barbados who have some phenomenal ideas, and when I ask if they know about Future Barbados, they don't. And I'm not saying that we don't advertise or promote, but as a government, we are having a challenging time in reaching the ears and minds of our citizens because of the amount of noise that surrounds them all the time, and the ways in which they can disappear into technology and just be completely unaware of other things. And so some of them, when they're trying to move their idea forward, feel challenged because our ecosystem is not yet fully developed in a way that makes for ease of having an idea, getting someone to listen to it, getting pointed in the right direction, getting the technical assistance that they need, and to be able to get the support all the way through. They butt upon the obstacles and the inefficiencies within the government system that then can become very discouraging. That's why I am really, really pleased to hear of the different products that you are developing to try to increase efficiency, because it will help access. But my question is, what plans do you have for working on helping people to know and understand some of these products? Because some of it will go over people's heads. I've spent time in supermarkets teaching people about Ask Delia, right? So I want to know what they are in your plans for this year to ensure that the information gets right down into people at every level in the society, so they understand that the opportunities are there, because while they do not know, they feel left out. They feel we shut them out. They feel no one is hearing them.
Thank you for that question, Minister. So I'll just do a slight aside to say that one of the intriguing things about Future Barbados, for me personally, and this is a personal note, is it's managed to have the impact that it's had, but the reality is that it operated for much of its existence on a budget of less than $2 million a year. So you're talking about impacting thousands and engaging hundreds in terms of work of all types of formats, but the impact of it is limited, is certainly outsized by the budget allocated to it. And so that's why we are pleased by the adjustment and increase this year, so that we can do more, quite frankly, and reach more people and be more impactful. So that's one. In addition to that, I think there is a fair critique of certainly the first year that I've had this role and in charge of the ministry, that not enough work has been done on the deep levels of public engagement about the good work that's been coming out of it. We fully intend to evolve that this year, quite frankly, and build out a mechanism within the ministry which is really around public education, around content output, around much more physical engagements in terms of events, much more focus on having a public profile that is education-centric and informative-centric, and quite frankly, inspiration-centric. I think a Ministry of Technology and Science and Innovation could give good news every week, right? I think we should have a pipeline where we share with the public things that excite them, that inspire them, that help them to overcome things that they were fearful of, and show them how to do things that they didn't yet know how to do. So we've taken on that responsibility, and you have my assurance that will be a lot more of what you see coming out of the ministry coming this financial year. It's already baked into the plan.
Well, one of the things I wanted to hear, I think it might be in the Ministry of Energy and Business, but what I wanted to know is, along with the Future Barbados, the technical assistance platform that is there to help support entrepreneurs with ideas and moving forward. What do you have in relation to that, or does it only reside in Energy and Business?
No, sorry, thank you, Minister, but we spoke a little bit about that earlier, and we could frame it just for the sake of, yeah, so we could go a little bit more detail. BIDC previously had a special technical assistance. Well, Mark, you could do a better job at answering this than I can, so why don't you speak to that? Sorry, apologies.
Yeah, so Minister, as far as special technical assistance is concerned, there's a stack of technical assistance that we've been providing, and that starts from at the level of IP, intellectual property. So in terms of being able to secure and prove that the idea that you have is authentic, it is yours, and that it has the scientific rigor around it that it can either qualify as a patent, it can qualify as an industrial design, or qualify for some sort of trademark registration. So that's one layer, and we're providing that. The other aspect of technical assistance that is critical for businesses is standards and funding the process of a company becoming HACCP certified. So that is also pretty much still being provided. So if we're talking about technical assistance from the standpoint of accounting and marketing, that layer there are many agencies across the ecosystem that provides that, but we believe that the technical assistance that we provide has to be technical, making sure that those companies have the scientific backing and rigor behind them, that their product can be sustainable and their product can scale going forward. So to that extent, STA is no longer just giving you a grant, but STA is also providing the infrastructure and the technical services around your company so that you can be comfortable in being able to deliver the goods or the services that you want to deliver to the public. So it has become more mature, more evolved than just simply giving persons, a $300 or $3,000 grant. It is now a lot more non-cash support systems that we provide at this point in time.
Sorry, apologies. If I could just add to that and to do the bookended. We did an assessment of what is our role. So in this instance, the SOE being BIDC has two major components of his remit, right, around industrial development and around export, right? So our role in the entire ecosystem is to take things that are ready to be industrial scale or ready to be exported. And so we understand that we have to participate in the feedstock for things becoming industrial scale. We have to participate in things getting ready to be export ready. We understand all of that. But the specificity of the expectations of our act and our board is really around how do we get things ready to be at that level. So we work hand in hand with trust loans. We work hand in hand with enterprise growth fund. We work hand in hand with YES. We work hand in hand with everything that kind of has different levels of grants and interactions and so on. But our role in it is really say, okay, you've created this product, you have this entity that is producing it. We need to get you to scale where you are industry grade, And when you're industry grade, how can you go beyond just selling to Barbadians in Barbados, but now starting to sell to the region and to the world? And so we've narrowcasted to allow us to be even better at that core remit that is central to our act.
My last question is, one of the things that I'm concerned about is, I love the idea of moving into the digital space, the advanced manufacturing space, because manufacturing had really gone down in Barbados. But I'm concerned about services. Services is a part of our economic mix, and it was supposed to be our area of comparative advantage. And I haven't heard an address on how we're going to move services forward. Because if we're going to take advantage of the trade agreements which we have made across the region, we have a number of them, and it allows us to do goods and services. I just wonder, where is that in your mix?
Honourable Member, is this a new question or is this a follow-up question?
No, it follows on from what they were explaining about when we were talking about technical assistance to businesses. They only spoke about the production and manufacturing. So I was reminding them that services exist, and that services is where our comparative advantage is, and that we have to move both together to take advantage of the trade agreements that Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade has spent a great deal of time securing.
Thank you, we have to be
Good,
clear.
I'm glad you get the connection, sir.
Chair, the truth is I do think that question is probably more centrally placed with my senior minister, quite frankly, than us. But services, let me frame it this way, and I spoke a little bit about it earlier, is because we carry the portfolio of technology, and much of the work that we've been doing, or Miss has traditionally been doing, is around technology for the government. We think of it differently. How can we build a technology industry? And the technology industry will become a service industry, right? Because it'll be creating software as a service, it'll be creating products, it'll be creating skills that could be applied locally as well as globally, right? So our contribution around the service sector, in our minds, is dominating the area of technology with skills and products that become services using technologies, our own language models, our own AIs, our own capacity to create things that Barbadians indigenously develop from here and then scale to the world. And we think that's how we can make the strongest contribution to the service industry, quite frankly.
Honourable Member for St. Thomas.
Mr. Chairman, I'm glad that you can look to your left. And thank you for the opportunity, Honourable Minister, for your presentation.
I will caution you to utilize your time wisely.
I have always been taught to be cautious, Mr. Chairman. I sat and actually enjoyed the presentation by the Honourable Minister and his team thus far. I was very intrigued by his stance on institutional excellence, industrial innovation, and broadening digital access. Now, one of the major drivers expected to shape and transform the life of many countries in the world is technology. In addition to the geo-economic fragmentation that we're seeing, and the green transition is really technology that is one of the biggest drivers of how we exist. And broadening digital access will be a large part of that, particularly in a small country like Barbados, where there's an existing digital divide, where there's a reluctance or failure of most public sector agencies to transform into a digital reality from moving from analog. And even the pace of digital transformation has been a bit slow when we add the artificial intelligence component beyond what we know from moving to analog to digital would be. Many of the jobs which exist now perhaps will not exist in another 5 to 10 years. The World Economic Forum reports last year and this year speak to that rapid change. And there's a fear, and there's a real fear that jobs will disappear in this transformation. Automation, robotics, artificial intelligence, etc. All these things are creating a natural apprehension about technology and its role in human development. We know jobs will disappear, but the truth is that the research has shown that jobs will also change and jobs will also be gained. And with that framework in mind, I'm asking the minister, I know that this is not under your ministry, but Head 50 in the estimate speaks to an agency of which I have the opportunity to lead as the Minister of Home Affairs, which is our post office. And there are many people who are employed in the postal sector in Barbados. The postal sector hasn't the opportunity to take the initiatives that you're pushing in your ministry to digitally transform the way in which we do business. And first question, Mr. Chairman, therefore, is what do you see are the possible ways in which we can digitally transform something as simple as the postal service delivery, which we have done very well over many, many years, given where technology is and given where the structure of our current system is?
You asked me to brainstorm in public, but you're my friend, so I could do it. So a couple of things. One, to your point about WEF reports, World Economic Forum reports and all those things. So I see it both ways. I see that there's going to be a future where some of the roles that are in existence now are going to be transformed, or humans are not going to perform as well as digital machines will perform. And that's not new, right? History is replete of technology replacing the performance of manual tasks. What is happening, of course, is now this is happening faster than perhaps any other stage in history. So that's not new. And so there's some management of the fear around that has to happen. But anyone who's traveled to, let's say you're in Europe somewhere, and you're going from one nation to another, you're going from Germany to France or something like that on a highway, and it's 2 5-lane highways, and all you're seeing is semi-trucks that's full of stuff going from one place to another, whether it's food, whether it's furniture, whether it's cars, whether it's this activity. Because humans need physical engagement. The more digital the world becomes, the more physical it becomes. You need more wires to power all this digital technology. You need more physical plants for power all those AI platforms that we have. You're going to need more compute, you're going to need more chips, you're going to need more things to power all these things. The more humans we have, the more food we will require. So I think the fear of not having physical activity in a really advanced physical world, I think it's misplaced, quite frankly. I understand why the fear exists. I don't think it fully represents what is the truth of living here. And we all experienced it during COVID. We all thought we were never going to go back to physical meetings. 6 months into it, we all hated Zoom meetings because you wanted physicality. Human nature is by its very existence community-based, right? And we want physical existence. So we don't eat digital food. So I think we have to have a mature conversation about that in our specific context as an island. And part of that conversation in the specific context of an island, I like to think of the post office, and I'm brainstorming with you a little bit, so I'm taking a risk, as really, it's a logistics hub. That's what it really is. And if you think of an island, my friend, the Minister of Finance, and I talk about this, an island is in the business of logistics. That's all it really does. It needs inputs and outputs to exist. And much of the things that it needs to exist, it doesn't create itself, right? So the wood, the clothes, the computers that we all use in here, they weren't indigenous to here, right? They were imported here, and that required logistics. The post office is our highest performing entity by the state in logistics. So I think what it has to become is a master of logistics, not just a master post, right? And so my ability to send information via letter, I don't need the letter to send that information anymore. I need to move the information. But the logistics of the information moving is still necessary. The logistics of money moving is still necessary. The logistics of food moving is still necessary. So how do I convert the entity that which is responsible for logistics, that has deep history in logistics, has the act supported in logistics, has the skill and talent to manage logistics, into a logistics center on behalf of the government? That's how I would think about it. And you've got me in trouble because it's, you know, but anyway, we'll go for it.
Thank you, Minister. In also picking back up on the theme of digital transformation, we struggle in Barbados to get some basic things right. I have complained to you about the fact that I have a driver's license. I had one, I lost it, and I
You can't bring up the, it's fixed.
Yeah, but I had to drive around with a whole set of papers in case I was stopped by the police in this age. But we do carry the driver's license information on our Trident ID card. And for a long time that wasn't updated. I know you said it's been fixed, and I'm grateful that it's been fixed, but what other steps are there in your ministry's plans to make use of the Trident ID card and to make life easier for Barbadians?
Yeah, so thank you for that, Minister. So
Before you answer, Honourable Member, is that your follow-up? You know it's not connected. You know it's not connected. You know it's not connected.
No, my question was within the concept of digital transformation, Chair, and that's why I framed the discussion. It wasn't on post office logistics.
You were allowed in the first place, Honourable Member, with a question from another ministry, not yours. You understand that?
Yes, I do understand, Chair.
Good. Go ahead, Honourable Minister.
you like me to proceed, Chair?
You can proceed.
Okay, no problem. So connecting to Minister Jordan's question about the connectivity of MIS to all ministries, the licensing is a perfect example of that. So the Ministry of Innovation and Science and Technology doesn't host, it doesn't manage the licensing system. Also, it doesn't manage the digital identification system. It doesn't manage any of those two things. The data is hosted on our servers, but we don't have access to the data because it's not our data. So I just want to have that clarity. However, we are in the business of solving problems, right? So we interceded and helped solve a problem where the information was hosted on the information that was held by one entity wasn't talking to information of another entity, and so there was a technology bridge that was created that allowed them to talk to each other in a way that resolves those problems. And so a lot of the fundamental work that I talked about with GovTech, and the CEO talked about also, Chelsea Bradford talked about with Amini, a lot of that foundational work of making things talk to each other and connect to each other in a way that they've never have before is some of the foundational work that we've been doing, and a lot of what we'll be spending time over this year and coming years doing. And that then translates the ease of doing business in a variety of ways. Now, I know that ID has become a little bit of a hot topic button, so I just want to be very clear on that. It's really around how do you make people's lives as easy to do business as possible. Your information is your information. I am the owner of my data, right? But my data can exist somewhere, and I can grant permission for that data to be able to be exchanged for the purpose of a service. Now, how that happens right now in some ways is very manual, and quite frankly, some instances are a little bit dangerous. If I go to get a loan from a bank, for instance, the bank asks me very specific information. The bank then keeps that information for extended period of time. Sometimes they extend that period of time beyond what is by the law or good practice for them to do it. God forbid something happens to their security systems, my data is now a danger. So the length of time that that data is managed on third-party entities puts me at risk. We're building a system that limits that risk to almost zero. right? We're building a system where on the point of transaction, that you and I are doing a transaction, and in the moment of that transaction, you give me permission to know something about you for the purpose of that transaction, and when that transaction is ended, you no longer have access to my information. So we're using the advancement in technology. It's very, very nerdy. It's called zero knowledge proof, but we're using that technology to be able to limit the exposure of risk of people's danger in a way that was not possible, quite frankly, 2-3 years ago, right? So we feel very strongly about the ability to keep people's information safe. We feel very strongly about the need to strike the balance between convenience and safety, both from my data commissioner's perspective as well as a cybersecurity perspective. We're spending a lot of time thinking about the architecture, about how we do that to make sure that we can move quickly but securely and things that people enjoy to use, right? So we'll do a specific engagement with the nation around that, so we bring people along to understand what we're doing around that, but we think this will, quite frankly, be one of the most powerful and important things that the ministry will do for the next couple of years.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. I actually want to congratulate you for the work that you've done. They're making life easier for a lot of people. It was a lot of difficulties. I yield back my time to you, Mr. Chairman.
Honourable Member for St. John.
Thank you, Chair. All of my questions are related to sports, sir. My disclaimer. Minister, good afternoon to you and your team. I just want to expand with a comment, not a question, on what the Honourable Member from St. Peter would have mentioned, and you referred to 2 constituencies, but in actual fact, I do have community centers all over the island. So when you're looking to roll out, just hoping that we can have that discussion. In relation to sports, technology is now fused to every possible sporting discipline that you can think of. And my first question is, what do you have in place for your transformational strategy as it relates to sports? First question.
Thank you, Minister. And absolutely regarding collaboration, regarding the rollout of across all the community centers, absolutely. I'll tease you the same way that I teased the Minister of Labor. You are well aware that one of our major initiatives recently was regarding the intersection between digital technology and sports, and actually bringing a truly outstanding sporting icon in the form of Clarence Seedorf to Barbados to host a series of training camps. And what was highly compelling for that project for us, obviously the ministry is not the Ministry of Sport, but what was highly compelling in the conversation that made us make the decision in terms of a relationship with him through the Future Barbados program, and to Aitul, we'll talk a little bit more about that. We can talk more about that with a framework of what we call in Future Sport, is the intersection between technology and sport. And in fact, what he was creating was a digital training program that allowed youngsters to utilize their phones or whatever mobile platform they have to enhance their skills in a specific sport or just self-development in general, utilizing mobile applications and the love of sport, in this instance, love of football, to be able to enhance how they are able to do the thing that they love. And critically, I'll be honest with you, what was the real seller in the partnership for me was his high level of focus really around the careers around sports, and not focusing just as the 1% who are likely to play in the big leagues the way that he did, but what are all the other people involved in terms of data analytics or the media of it, or the app development, or the lawyers of it, or the accountants, everyone who's within the ecosystem of sports development, and how can technology play a role in advancing utilizing their love and passion for sports to develop a career that's related to it. So it was a very dynamic program. I don't know, Tamaisha, do you want to add a little bit more to it so that you could talk about where we're going with the idea of future sport?
Sure. Is this volume okay for everybody this afternoon? Hi. Tamaisha Eitel, Director of Future Barbados, here again, and I'll sit back from the microphone so it's not as loud. The Future Sport plan moving forward is to embed the Seedorf Academy through partnerships with the BFA and the Secondary Schools League in order to enhance the sports economy that we want to build. And as I said earlier, Future Barbados and technology, it's not technology that will lead everything, technology will enable everything. So there's sports technology with sensors, et cetera, in stadiums and tracking, but for the ownership of the young athlete to understand their stats, their biometrics, and their place, and be able to use the technology to enable them to manage the programs. We also will be working towards enhancing the PE curriculum as well with the Seedorf methodology as part of it, and going through a train the trainers approach, because it's not just about the elite athlete, it is about the mindset of the coaches and the students and how we're impacting the everyday lives. As we saw through the program, it was 130 students who came through our program and 15 coaches. And now they cannot wait for the next part. And in the next 6 months, we're hoping by September to have the first iteration with community-based satellites of the same Seedorf Academy, and all the members who are parts of that will be able to be onboarded onto this platform. Not just the students, not just the parents, but also the educators themselves. And this is not sports specific, so it doesn't have to be just football, it can be sports education in general, because the mindset training, the ability to work across stakeholders are part of the methodology that we want to use. So that's where the future sport direction will be in the next financial year. Thank you.
If I could just follow on that, and that's an example of it. When Clarence was, Seedorf was in Barbados, he was able to pull up his iPad and showed me his quarterly test that he tested on his biometrics for his entire career, for 20 years going back. His blood levels, his cortisone levels, his bone density, and tracked all his data. And he said to me, listen, this is the information I use to negotiate my contracts. So in addition to how many goals I scored, how many assists, I presented this, my lawyer would present this in my negotiations to show the level of asset that these clubs were investing in. And so I collected all that information. And so sport is beyond just the activity of playing the ball. It's really the science of biomechanics for the purpose of them becoming a professional and treating himself like a business. And so that's the ethos of the relationship that we're bringing. We're leveraging the idea of sports to introduce high fidelity opportunities in technology and high fidelity opportunities in science.
Thank you. I was actually just reading about Max Allen, at 16 years old, did a transfer for £1.5 million. I'm going to ask you, Minister, the same question that I asked a number of our colleagues in relation to having a point person in the ministry that can sit down with my team in relation to rolling out this strategy as it relates to using the technology now to benefit all of our athletes, as mentioned. The other thing that I want to speak about, and I guess this will come up in that conversation, is esports. It is not big in Barbados, but there's a need for us now to embrace esports. There's a lot of youngsters, as you mentioned, who are home and doing a lot of stuff on the computer. And I would want to, formalize it in a way that we can set up something now. So is that something that is also within your scope? Still sports, Chair.
So to the first query, absolutely. And as you know, we reached out personally and obviously through your office when we were doing the event. And obviously, it was with your consent within your role in cabinet in the first place to have the project go over the line. So we're always ready to collaborate and go deeper, quite frankly. I've just seen what you rolled out in terms of the glass floor at the gymnasium, which looks fantastic, right? So just using technology in a different way. Imagine graphic designers and motion designers being able to design things, leveraging sport, using that platform that you create to create digital art during games. I think you could do extraordinary things with that. So yes, always to collaborate. Regarding your question regarding esports, Mr. Sutherland, when he was Minister of Sport, would tell you that I used to harass him quite a bit about the idea of esports and the idea of leveraging the fact that we had a FIFA office in Barbados and FIFA was going very aggressively around esports to create esports tournaments in Barbados. So I am all in. The value of it, for instance, in Asian market is in tens of billions of dollars annually, right? This is a humongous market, right? So leveraging the opportunity for young people to become, as it's called, esport athletes and develop careers in it, I think this makes perfect sense. You already have a great interest in video games and video game production and playing. We actually have a video game testing entity that exists in BIDC's Harbour Road complex. And so you already have an active interest in people who are in that sector. And so creating an industry around that, this makes perfect sense. So I'll be more than pleased to collaborate on that.
Final question, Chair. NAPSAC, the finals will be happening on Friday. There's a lot of potential there. I'm wondering if your ministry will be able to help the Ministry of Sports to create a dashboard that we can...
Honourable member, is this a different question?
No, this is sports. This is sports. Still sports. Related sports, all sports. A dashboard, minister, to be able to track some of these youngsters, because if we're to get some of the youngsters off island to train, then I think there's an absolute need to have that dashboard that we can track from primary, the progress right up the ladder. So I'm hoping that it is possible to work with you to create that dashboard. Last question, Chair. I yield back.
Honourable member, that was your last question. Proceed, Honourable Minister.
Short answer is yes, of course, we're willing to collaborate. But more than that, to be honest, I alluded to it earlier. I think the Ministry of Innovation should be in the business of more innovation and being more creative and having more fun. I think that we often get bogged down with the minutiae of things that feel heavy, and we forget that, you know, life is for the living. And so people are so enamored and excited about their kids being involved in athletics and sports, that all of these activities have grown up. And people are dedicating so much time into those things. So it'd be quite fun, frankly. I can imagine something like Future Barbados assisting with you on building up not only platforms for dashboards, but trackers and different models that could be something that drives more capacity building and interest around that area. So absolutely.
Honourable member for St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Chair. The question I have relates to standards. For a long time, we've been talking about standards with respect to how they facilitate trade. I know that the Honourable member for St. James Central became synonymous with the term sanitary and phytosanitary. The question I have is, at this point, how has, is the probably correct English, how has that standard improved our trade performance, if it has, or maybe I should ask the question, has it been implemented? And if it has, how has it improved our trade and the industry that will drive the trade coming out of that?
Thank you, Minister. We spoke a bit this morning about our viewpoint on standards economy and quality economy, and some specific examples were given regarding the work we've done in those areas. So I'll let a combination, but I'll start with, since your current conversation was around trade, I'll start with BIDC, and then obviously the director of BNSI can weigh in on this to give specific information regarding the improvement of trade as a result of this. So my CEOs asked me to repeat the question. So I'll do it so on your behalf, Minister. The minister is asking what has been the relationship between the improvement of standards, specifically around phytosanitary standards, and then the uptake in terms of trade capacity for the products that are created in Barbados. So I thought you would have jumped all over that and tell me about Ulu Foods and all those different things that you've been doing.
Thank you, Minister. Yeah, in terms of the sanitary and phytosanitary standards as it impacts on trade, what we find is happening is that the labs that we need to put in place, we need to accelerate the development of those particular labs. The impact on trade around exporting fresh vegetables and fresh food and meats as well. We really need to upgrade in that particular area. So we're hoping to close the gap in discussion with the Ministry of Agriculture so that that can really lend itself to a greater uptake. So for example, there's some produce that can get past the global gap certification needs around sanitary and phytosanitary. So for example, crops like breadfruits, passion fruits that are pretty much packaged in their own skin. But any other crop that like leafy vegetables and stuff that have direct consumption, the sanitary and phytosanitary impact is significant. Also like cruise ships. There's certain things we can't export to cruise ships as yet. So we need to close that gap really quick, and that is a scientific relationship between both Ministry of Agriculture and industry and the infrastructure being put in place so that we can close that gap as fast as possible. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Minister. Just to continue from where CEO Hill mentioned, so the acronym NAFCA, that's really the National Agriculture and Health Food Control Agency. So the thinking was to strengthen the sanitary and phytosanitary standards, as you said, so that we can facilitate trade. Now, the trade environment is such that international trade is really based on international standards. So BNSI, we do have very strong partnerships. One, we're a member of the ISO. ISO is the International Standards Organization, where 183 countries come together to agree, look, these are the specifications that we are going to utilize and we're going to agree to for trade. We were fortunate to provide to the minister for assent and have gazetted I think it was a few months ago, so late last year, we gazetted 44 standards, many of them related to trade. Some of them in collaboration with our regional standards development organization, and that's CROSSQ. That acronym stands for the CARICOM Regional Organization for Standards and Quality. Again, the focus here was to have the regional and international agreement where Barbados too can have standards. Part of the suite included poultry feed and feed ingredients, processed foods, cocoa and chocolate products, biscuits, and then others were non-food related, but they were a suite coming out of sustainable tourism and so on. But the understanding is that if we are not competing with international standards in our space, we are losing the ability to trade freely, because a lot of the requirements internationally are just that. The first bar that you have to jump over is an international specification. And the sanitary and phytosanitary conditions were such that that was the primary interest within NAFCA. Yeah.
Chair, I have a follow-up. And it relates to the CEO mentioned breadfruits. My canvassers would not want me to allow the word to be called and not ask a question, only because during the election campaign, we were seeing breadfruits on the ground everywhere. And many of the canvassers remembered the call some time ago and asked me. I couldn't answer at that point in time, and I was a little bit more interested in getting votes than calling Mr. Hill. So I'll use this opportunity to do that. The question was, particularly among the older people, all these breadfruits on the ground, this is good food. What became of that project? And that's a follow-up question that I'm asking to, maybe through you, Chair, and the Minister, to Mr. Hill.
Thank you, Minister. This is Mark Hill's area of deep passion, so I'll hand over to him.
Yeah, thanks, Minister. The outcome of that project is that we have one of the biggest brands in Barbados that has developed in terms of Ulu Foods. So Ulu Foods have evolved into a super brand that started just a few years ago, just parallel with the call for those berry fruits. And today they've won over 3 prizes. The top healthy food product in Texas. They're the top healthy food product growing across USA. In fact, as I speak, they're scrambling to meet an order of outfitting their product in 800 Sprout stores across Texas. And that has nothing to do with the additional demand. So what we're having is a shortage of berry fruit to actually meet the need that Ulu Foods alone has. And I don't know if members have tasted their product, but it is a phenomenal product. You can across the entire Massey chain as well. But it is showing that Barbados and Barbadians can produce world-class products using indigenous inputs. So right now we have the challenge of trying to solve getting berry fruit at scale. So the company has grown so rapidly over the last few months that we now have to look at how we industrialize off-taking berry fruits, not just at the village level, but also at the industrial level across the board. So the constituents need to follow through. I think Uluda's off-take and buy berry fruit as high, I think around $250 for one. And they have been complaining about not getting enough berry fruit. So maybe it's a matter of communication if you have a berry fruit tree, communicating. And also to finding the workers in that particular space was also some difficulty as well. So it is a sector that has rapidly developed because of it is a superfood in the global market. And we expect Ulu to continue to grow rapidly. And wherever we can get inputs that will help them to scale, that is a primary objective of our, one of the primary objectives of our industrial strategy. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I'm not going to follow up with a question, but just to say what I saw and we saw on the ground, no pun intended, suggests that we could do a much better job of continuing to sensitize, because there are some people who remembered that there was this program, but yet there are all these breadfruits on the ground. In St. Peter, we say spatter out. You may not understand, but spatter out. And we may need to do some more work with respect to sensitizing so that people from their breadfruit trees can earn some additional funds. Thanks very much, Mr. Chair.
Minister, I know that you and CEO Hill are close collaborating colleagues and friends, and so I'm sure that you're going to point in the direction where you saw all these excess feedstock for the entity that he's supporting. Thank you.
Honourable Member for St. Michael South.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My question, Minister, is in relation, really, as my mind goes to the future, is in relation to the future. Now, I had the privilege to sit where you are now sitting last year, and I made a point that across the public service, we have to become more comfortable with the idea, for those of us who are in leadership, this idea of experimenting. Of course, it made many people uncomfortable, but I think leadership, as opposed to management, is continuous experimentation. In this particular ministry, I suspect this is the one place where we need to be experimenting, where we need to be innovating, where there has to be a system to fail forward, where we have to encourage people to do things and to be, unlike the grain in Barbados, a little bit less risk averse. And I am keen to know what systems are in place in this ministry as we think about the future. What systems are in place in this ministry, and what is the process by which we emerge new ideas and we build ideas that would allow Barbados to go forward? Like, is it a sandbox? What is the regulatory framework? How do we encourage and generate, process, capture, implement these new ideas? What is the process for adaptive learning? I just figure that it's a necessary step across the public service, but that's certainly in the Ministry of Innovation and Science and Technology. You know, I'm very keen to know what is that particular process in this ministry, Minister.
So, Minister, I'm not sure if it's against protocol or good manners to say that is by far my favorite question for the day, but it is. And I remember you making your presentation last year, and I was, if I'm honest, I was surprised that you did it given the mandate that you had at the time, and I loved it, to be honest. And I felt that I speak a little bit about the idea of having more fun as well, and there's room for that, but there's also needs to be a component of coordinated risk-taking that a small place has to do. Because you have to position yourself to not just be a taker of finished products by another market for which you are just excess, but you have to be a creator of things that are new and new value that then you could be sent to the world. And I think that's a fundamental shift in how we approach things. Now, you can't do things willy-nilly. You can't do things that are wasteful. And so you have to have a coordinated structure around how you do those things, especially considering that you're using taxpayers' funds. So you have to be accountable for how you do those things. So what we have designed and how we thought about it is actually was the first cabinet paper that I had the privilege of bringing, was the idea of positioning Barbados as a global research and development hub. The idea that you're going to experiment on purpose, and you're going to experiment to create new value that the world never had before. And you do that on the basis of solving problems that exist for you that are very expensive, so non-communicable diseases, potholes, sargassum, whatever, right? A broad range. We have a multiple of problems like every place does, right? And these problems, some of which are billions of dollars in value, and some of them are a little less than that, but they are very important to us to solve. And so how can you, to use the word of Jamila Mosley, and she'll speak more about it than I will, to experiment on purpose, right? You experiment on purpose and with purpose for the purpose of solving things. And you have to open up your mindset to realize that innovation is not restricted by geography, right? You have to open yourself up to receive new ideas and new ways of thinking and collaborate with yourself to build things that didn't exist before. So we've built a very specific, through cabinet permission, a very specific component of the ministry. As I said earlier today, that I was really excited about the science portfolio, but even more than the science portfolio, I was really excited about the idea of what the innovation arm of it could mean for experimenting and creating new things. So we've created effectively a research and development hub within the ministry. We call it Supernova Labs. Jamila, I don't know if you could speak a little bit more to specifically what we're doing. And you could get very technical, so apparently we're not supposed to get super technical today.
Thank you, Minister. Jamila Mosley, Executive Director of Supernova Lab, the National Research and Development Program that sits under the Ministry of Innovation, Industry, Science and Technology, quite intentionally as the first cabinet paper that was presented in April of 2025. As Minister said, we are experimenting on purpose with purpose. And really that is because historically, public sector-led experimentation or research and development was to solve three specific things: survival, protection, and flourishing. Survival within the context of cyber resilience and security, protection in terms of our standards and our safeguards that we've spoken to at length for the duration of today. And flourishing is where we have the opportunity to sit. And I think it is important to mention that we first sat in Future Barbados because that's where flourishing in Barbados is centralized under the Ministry of Innovation, Industry, Science and Technology. Not so shameless plug. And so when designing that program, and we're still in the embryonic stages of that program, we have two distinct streams of work. The industrial component sits as the experimentation zone. That is our formal way of accepting or vetting any commercial inbound interest, and it has to align with the national priorities of this country. And then we also do capacity and capability building under the ARC Academy, which focuses on deepening the scientific and technical research capacity at the university level with the Faculty of Science and Technology and the KFIL School of Business, and also widening that pool to international academic collaborators. I think it is critical to understand that experimentation is something that every single ministry should be doing. And it is a privilege for us to be able to create or be in the process of creating a standardized model for small state experimentation. Because when you look at the size of our states, we don't necessarily have the land mass to compete with massive global actors. But we certainly have the land mass and the ingenuity in country to be able to develop products and services at a much more rapid rate than if they were in other markets. And we've seen that demonstrated through collaborations with companies like NVIDIA and other actors who are actively experimenting with the Ministry of Innovation, Industry, Science and Technology. I also want to add, since I have the opportunity to, that the mandate that this ministry is currently focused on is the amplification of a mandate that was set in the missions of Barbados, specifically Mission 5 and Mission 6. It is the manifestation of the expectation of BERT 3.0, and it is also the understanding that digital development is not necessarily something for the future, it is something that is happening right now.
If I could just follow on that, Minister, and to get much more specific, and Cabinet colleagues would know this, that in addition to kind of the overall framework, there was specificity of things that we felt that Barbados was well placed to be first in the world of trying the existence of this thing or regulating it, right? So whether it's autonomous flight over our oceans, or whether it's something related to ocean energy, or whether it's something related to the conversion of sargassum into biofuels, or the conversion of usage of AI products for the purpose of automating some component of work that's difficult. All of these things need a place that says, hey, we can regulate it first, and so that it can be scaled to other mass markets. And that's one of our distinct advantages of being small. I mean, there are lots of disadvantages of being small, but and so small market size, small talent base, small budgets in some instances, but your ability to move for regulation faster than very large places, and so deploy impactful solutions to people is an advantage that we have as a result of being small, and we have to own it. Now, to do that, we have to manage our risk tolerance. Now, not everything is for us. Certain things that we have, we don't feel comfortable with, and we should always stick true to our values. Certain things don't suit the profile of who we are as people, but some things do. We have a significant problem with non-communicable diseases, for instance. It costs us billions of dollars a year if you think of it in terms of medical bill and productivity loss. If you compound it, it's enormous. We are not the creators of the solutions in most instances that we go after non-communicable diseases. We are the receivers of solutions that have gone through different pipelines, and quite frankly, some of these solutions were designed for people who are not of our ethnicity for the large part. Let's put it very plainly. And yet still we are receivers of these solutions and not makers of solutions that can then scale to other places. We want to change that. We want to find problems that are inherently large scale and difficult for us, and also difficult for other places, and be at the place where these things can originate from. Now, some of it will be original or indigenous to a young Barbadian or Barbadian company will conceive of this thing, and that's fantastic, and we want lots of that. But some of it will be people who are not Barbadian, but they will become Barbadian by registering the company here, being based here, doing the research here, and the IP existing here, and paying taxes here. We want to do both. And that's why I was an incredible supporter of the growth and diversification bill, for instance, because the capacity to attract global business to do high value things from Barbados is what we need a lot more of. And to your idea of positioning ourselves where experimentation is something that we're known for, and expectations is something that we do well. And we have a track record around it. We're the home of rum, we're the home of Bajan cherries, we're the home of aloes, we're the home of a bunch of different things that were created in Barbados, right? The style of cricket that we see and we love right now with T20, we can easily attribute the origin of it to Barbados, right? So many things that we have become the creators of, but haven't claimed the value of it. We need to change that. And as we said, experimenting on purpose and with purpose.
Chair, I've really enjoyed this conversation, listening and the answers to my questions, because in a sense, this ministry is like talking to the future, which is how I framed my question in the first place. But at the same time, Minister, I would not be honest with myself if I didn't feel the need to say that even as we contemplate this great future, the idea of technology debt, this idea that perhaps we invest, and your estimates are substantial, we invest substantial amounts in these technological advances that perhaps would leave future generations, if not carefully implemented, carefully thought through, future generations perhaps with fiscal and operational burdens to carry. And I just want to know what assessments you have in place to ensure that we do not end up with this technology debt that perhaps may be too difficult for the rest of us, particularly if it's a recurring expenditure every year.
Yes, a really great question. So that actually consumed my mind a lot when I first took the role, if I'm honest. That I saw the technology debt in two areas. One, there was a debt of underinvestment that happened for 25 to 30 years, was my calculation. And if annually, I think what is invested this year should be what has been invested for the last 15, 20 years, if I'm being frank. It's not as a result of my mandate. I really generally think that small nations need to outsize in level of investment in technology to keep pace with larger spaces. And the fact that we hadn't done that, and I just learned from Minister Ishmael that his was 40 million, and so that means I think we underinvested, and the debt was therefore an underinvestment for a long period of time. And that reflected in our infrastructure, the fact that you had so many manual processes, the fact that the skills that you have available to you are not as technologically advanced as some of your competitors you have. So it's the fact that we have such a sticker shock where we see some of the prices of cybersecurity teams or other teams because we are not accustomed of playing in that game. We had a significant debt to pay in that regard. So we needed a leap to take forward. Now, that's one component of the debt. The other component of the debt is, having made a decision to invest in something, are you investing in the right thing? And that then drills down to, what is the level of expertise that you have around you to make as best a possible decision as possible, given the information you have and the circumstance you're in? And so we spend a lot of time thinking about that. How do we crowd in much more technical experts that would share our values, understand the limitations of a small place, can be able to do arrangements with us that are commercial that suit the budgets that we have, are in it for the long haul for us. Not people that are going to be disappearing the moment they get a check. I made quite frankly, a purposeful decision to do engagement with entities that I felt comfortable that in case there was a difficult moment at 2 o'clock in the morning, can I find the CEO? Am I just talking to a representative in a Latin American office that can't solve my problem? Can I do business with people, and can the country therefore do business with people when we solve problems, that we have a direct relationship with ownership and leadership so that we can solve problems ongoing and not have, as you rightfully framed, this huge tech debt where things are broken and don't work. So we've made a very purposeful decision to beef up our sovereign capacity, to beef up our technical expertise and have a pool of people that we think we can get really good advice from a phone call away, and then doing business with people that if something breaks, can we get on a call with the leadership and can they be down working on fixing the things with us in the trenches in a short period of time to solve problems, because things will break, right? So it's not perfect, but I think we are in a better position than we were certainly a year or more ago. And so you have my assurance, I think a lot about that, and how do we make to ensure that we make really good decisions about important decisions that we make.
Sorry, I don't have a follow-up. I just want to say, I mean, we will obviously have to continue this conversation offline. But I do think the idea of this transformation shouldn't give Barbadians anxiety in any format, right? Like, that's why I began by telling us to think we need to simplify it. But I think this conversation is so critical. I think your ministry is so critical to us being a much more productive country, economy, even society. And therefore, obviously, I support the expansion and the estimates. And I'm grateful that you were able, you and your team, thus far have been able to show how this work is critical to every single ministry and essentially to how we deliver as a nation. So thank you.
Chair, through you, I mean, just to, not to overextend, but I think we, quite frankly, following on from your question, your ministry and my ministry have an opportunity to show exactly that experimentation on purpose. You are in charge of a national problem in terms of roadworks, but it's also a national opportunity, right? Where we can experiment regarding the work that BNSI is doing, for instance, but more than that, IoT sensors on the road to track road flow, optimizing the road to be a generator of power and just not a user of power, creating different uses of technology to manage traffic congestion and all those things. We can start experimenting with the mandate of what you have to show examples and impacting people's lives on a day-to-day basis. That we had such, we had a little bit of a hullabaloo when the idea was floated of making a word a one-way road. Well, we should be able to experiment for that for 2 days, and if it doesn't work, we change it back. All it is paint on the road, right? So why can't we be a space where we try new ideas? I tell the team all the time, a perfect example of experiment is driving, because you're doing critical thinking all the day long, right? You have in mind where you want to go a path, there's an accident, so you make a new decision, you change your mind, something else comes across, you change your mind. You're changing your mind all the time and you experiment all the way towards the end result, right? So infrastructure and road mobility is a perfect example of how we could inculcate the idea of taking more experiments, trying new things, but with a sense of purpose and a deliverable that we can all agree that we could head towards. So I'd love to collaborate on this.
There's nothing else to add. I mean, I look forward to working with Mr. Ryan and his team. I look forward to working with you. I do believe that we could pilot something transformational and amazing to be able to settle real-life problems. And I just feel it is important, Chair, Minister, that we continue to help Barbadians understand that this ministry will solve real-life problems in a way that we have not been able to solve them before. And that those of us who have the opportunity to be alive in this moment now have the opportunity to take advantage of the things, the gifts that are before us. And so I have no objection to working with you. In fact, I welcome it. I hope I'm the first. And sir, on that I yield.
Honourable Member for St. James Central.
I'm ever so grateful, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I want to pick up where my colleague, the Honourable Member of St. Michael South would have left off, because we are talking to a ministry, or we are interrogating a ministry that really is the driver of transformation in many ways across Barbados. And to do so, I think that it is necessary to have those isolated, secure, controlled environments of many types, where you can, as you say, Honourable Minister, you use the word play around, but I know experiment around, and I think that is really experiment with purpose, and facilitate testing, and to have ideas being created and solutions being created as a result of the testing. In my judgment, a lot of that turns on the issue of our intellectual property. And as we know, the European economies in particular are decarbonizing, and governments there in Europe are pushing hard along the line of intellectual property development, intellectual property as the engine of growth. And I am thinking, as I listen to you, that there is now we've now come to a point in Barbados where finally the language that we are speaking is the language that the so-called industrialized first world is speaking, so-called first world is speaking, at the same time we are no longer speaking a language that we grew up using, which is that we will use somebody else's technology and we will rely on somebody else to provide us and show us and teach us, et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted to invite you to share a little bit of your ministry's vision of intellectual property driving growth in Barbados.
Yeah, that might have pipped Minister Humphrey as my favorite question. So prior to having the role I have right now as Chief of Staff to the Prime Minister, I presented a paper to her at the time of analysis I was thinking a lot about, is that there is a direct correlation, and the data is there, and I could share, the data is there to prove it. There's a direct correlation between the prosperity of small countries and the amount of IP that they register per capita. That small prosperous countries, Iceland, Singapore, Denmark, Norway, and small by population size, less than 5 million people or so, Ireland, they register incredible amounts of IP per capita in comparison to places that are not wealthy. Now, some of it might be self-fulfilling prophecies, right? Some of it may be virtuous cycles that are created. But what it drilled down to me is that to become prosperous as a small country, you needed to be solving more difficult problems that were first of the kind in solutions. That you had to spend a lot more time at the beginning of the market line. The market line has two ends, where you have the conception of a solution for the purpose of something new, and then you have the consumption of that thing that you've conceived of, right? Large spaces like the United States or Brazil or Nigeria or Philippines with large populations can dominate where you have large market consumption. We do not have that advantage, right? We are a very small market. So we need to play at the other end of that line, where the original concept is created, it is tested, it is regulated, it is registered, and then it's scaled to large marketplaces. And that's really the construct behind a lot of what we're thinking with Supernova Labs, a lot of what we're thinking with Giga, a lot of what we're thinking with these programs within NIS. How do we position Barbados to be a place where high-quality, world-class ideas are converted into products and services that are valuable in the global economy and exported out of Barbados to the world? And to do that, you have to become an engine for new intellectual property. The facilitation of intellectual property, the registering of it, the level of investment you put into your professors, the level of partnerships you do with think tanks and innovative groups to hub and be based in Barbados needs to be outsized to what we've done previously. You need to combine the fact that you have indigenous knowledge that exists here, from things like fauna and flora and ocean economy and all kinds of things, and then pool them together with global interests to be able to be building first of their kind things from Barbados. That's the path that Singapore took, that's the path that Israel took. All of these nations, if you look at their trajectory, there's a direct relationship with the importance they play in research and development and IP generation to the country's national development. And so for us, we have some advantages. I spend a lot of time talking to every single university that has a rough summer. Just this week, we're talking to one out of, in Canada, and we had a normal 32-degree day. They were at -20. I said, why would you be in -20 when you could be doing your research from Barbados? You need to be here. So they're organizing to come in May and another session in August. And so we can crowd in having advantages that you simply couldn't have before because of the advantage of compute. Now, we're not going to set up a bunch of $200 million biology labs. That's not where our strength plays. But the same data center that's 0.1 megawatts in Canada is the same data center here that's 0.1 megawatts. So the conversion of the data centers I spoke before as a tool of commercialization growth puts us in a unique position to be a place where IP can be built, registered, commercialized, and then scale out from here. So it's a huge part of what we're thinking, right? And all we're doing is just building new solutions for our circumstance. And so everything that GovTech is building, or not everything, a lot of GovTech will build in will be new instances of IP, things that have not been done before. The things that the Reclaiming Atlantic Destiny project is doing will be new instances of IP that's never been done before. Some of the things that we'll do at the Giga Park will be new instances of IP, right? So the things that we're doing in partnership with Amini, new instances of IP, all of this is going to be registered here, and then the value will be created here and scale outwards. So we are aggressive about this, because this is the future. You effectively have a resource that is the highest form of value, which is the IP of the product. And that's what we need to house here.
And I agree with you, Minister. I think that you've adequately answered the question of intellectual property as a growth engine in this country. And very closely, in fact, directly related to that, Mr. Chairman and Minister, is the question of that growth engine becoming a tool of diversification, I would have thought. And as I think about Barbados's GDP, and I'm trying to lay a foundation for you to be able to speak to the country more fully, because we know that when people think of the gross domestic product of Barbados, immediately will come to mind tourism. They will think of agriculture and the agricultural sector. They will think of the international financial services that we have had. But very infrequently would the name or the word pharmaceuticals, for example, arise. But as part of the intellectual property economy, we will now be in a place where pharmaceuticals can be part of that conversation. And I would like, my question therefore to you would be to elaborate on how we come from where we have been traditionally to this new frontier.
So a couple of things to that. Thank you for the quick follow-up question. A couple of things to that. One, I think we already are a country that's in the business of creating new things, but we haven't understood the value of registering and formalizing the new things that we created. And a simple example of that is the example Mark spoke about, Olu Foods, right? So there's a process, there's an end product, there's an actual product that's created that's unique. And so registering that is a powerful thing, and we've not been in the business of telling people about how to go doing that, and we have to significantly ramp that up. We could go a little bit further into that because Mark has this idea of what we call it IP to IPO, idea to IP, IP to IPO, of a national program of getting people to understand the value of new ideas and creating new products. That's one. But I want to give a very specific example of the power of IP and where the world is at. We are advanced in a negotiation. I'll be mindful of what I say. We are advanced in a negotiation with a large-scale global pharmaceutical company. And this pharmaceutical company could produce their product maybe anywhere in the world. And we were compelling in our argument of why we think you should do it here. In addition to our double taxation treaties, the rule of law, the safety of it, being able to distribute for our network chains of cold chain that is largely empty at the bottom of flights leaving Barbados. There's a series of reasons that stack up why it makes sense to produce this from Barbados, and we were compelling in the conversation. What we discovered when this entity came to Barbados is their number one concern was their data sovereignty of their IP. That in effect, what they travel with is, and I'm being a little glib, but for illustrative purposes, I'll say it this way. They effectively are traveling with a hard drive. And on their hard drive is their formula to making the medicine that they make. And so their number one concern is, how do we keep those formulas safe in a place that is new to us? What is your infrastructure around IP protection, data regulation? What are your data centers? What is your telecommunication infrastructure? How do we keep the thing that matters most to us is not the machine, is not whether, not the delivery van, it's the idea and the unique formula, the algorithm to making this end product. That's their highest form of value. And so ultimately, that's what companies are becoming. In effect, all your larger, major, wealthy companies in the world are becoming more and more tech companies. And these tech companies are guarding their IP, which is their algorithms and their processes. Now, in a small space, this is a transition that we have to take. But we're already doing that. But we just don't identify it as such. We solve problems that are interesting and unique all the time, but we don't register them as highly valuable things. We are, for instance, in the QAH, people are solving problems using machines in a way they haven't been used for because of scarcity. But they don't recognize that this new way of using the machine is actually valuable. And how can we convert that to IP for a different scale of a problem? We want to identify a pathway where Barbados becomes known for that, and we institutionalize that. Now, a huge component of that will become our relationship with university, both UE, as it exists now, and ultimately United Colleges of Barbados, as well as other universities that we have partnerships with. The framework for our existence of managing IP has to become a lot more sophisticated than it is right now, and you will hear a lot more from the ministry this year about the work around that. But it is the key component of what Minister Blackman talks often about, which is the knowledge economy, right? And knowledge economy is valuable through the registration of IP and us holding the data banks around IP and then optimizing that to global sales. I'm sorry if I got a little heady, but it's you know.
No. I think I deliberately wanted to offer you an opportunity, as I said, to speak to the country more fully via the questions that are put. And I feel as you're a senior minister, I have a right to have a duty actually to do that, because you've spoken, for example, to intellectual property, and Mr. Chairman, I know I have a second question follow-up. This will be the second. Intellectual property as an engine of growth. And equally, we have looked at the question just now of intellectual property as a means of economic diversification. And the two things can be, that you can grow and have the diversification at the same time. I think the other area that I want you to explore for the benefit of the listening, the members and the listening public, is the question of course correction and intellectual property as that tool to enable the economy of Barbados to correct course. It would be correct, I believe, to say that, and I'm going to invite you to elaborate on this, that we would have for a period of time gone through a process of deindustrializing Barbados. And that part of the mission of this ministry must now be to use tools like the same intellectual property that we're talking about to get us to a point of reindustrialization in Barbados. And if that thesis is correct, I would want you to elaborate on how that will unfold for the benefit of the average Barbadian and, of course, the wider Barbadian economy.
Thank you, Senior Minister. The numbers suggest that your premise is correct, that Barbados, over a period of 30 to 40 years, maybe purposefully or not purposefully, made a decision to what is called deindustrialize. Deindustrialization is a technical term which means, in effect, less than 15% of your economy is industry-based. Our economy is around 12% industry-based. Now, in the late 70s, it was almost 30% industry-based. And so, with the advent of more advanced and sophisticated tourism, more advanced international business, those were fantastic things and did a lot of good for Barbados. But as I said earlier today, places like Singapore, which are obviously incredible models to follow, made very purposeful steps that you cannot be in the business of not having a strong industry. Industry provides you technical jobs that are a very specific segment of society, and it offers you a level of base resilience in case of difficult times that sometimes you need the ability to make things of your own that's important to you. And so being in the business of making things is important for all economies. And so while thinking about that, then you have to be pragmatic about not being able to make everything, because not everything is well suited to make for a population of 270,000 people on 166 square miles. You have to pick things that are suitable to your conditions, and as well that you have a base advantage to be able to make those things. And we're going to have to make some choices regarding that, and that's just the reality. And so my premise of thinking of the entire line of a sale is that our proposition on reindustrialization is that we have to get closer to the inception stage, the idea stage, the prototype stage, the research and development stage of a product, which is the highest form of the value, rather than a mass production level of the product. Because we don't have a billion people like China or India. We don't have 200 million people like Nigeria. Your rate and scale of being able to create mass production is less than larger economies. But you still need some sort of balance of value in terms of trade that you want. And there's some things, quite frankly, you make a decision to make for yourself, even though you don't make it cheaper than someone else. These are the decisions that we have to make in the stack around reindustrialization. So for us is, what are the core inputs that we require to make that decision for ourselves? It's going to be around compute. It's going to be around research and development talent. It's going to be around advanced manufacturing that allow you to be able to have factories that can output at a scale and a rate that you simply couldn't have imagined 5 years ago, using AI, using industrial robots, using a bunch of things that you never had access to. You still need the human talent, you still need human ingenuity, you still need human input, because we live in a physical world, and long may that continue. But your ability to deliver, because you're a small island, is not impeded in the same way than it was just 5 years ago. That's why we need to embrace the technology. That's why we need to redevelop our focus around education to be producers of high quality goods, to be producers of critical thinkers who solve problems that are valuable to us and valuable to the world. And that feeds directly into industry, right? And so the core construct of how we think about reindustrialization is how do we make Barbados a place where important things are made from? Important for us and important to the world. And then how do we make lots of money from the things that we make that's important to us and important from the world? And that is true to our values, a sustainable living, as well as always prioritizing the value of labor and quality of life. That's really, really, with all the fancy language, that's what we drill down to.
I want to thank you, Minister. Effectively, I hope that this has now demystified some of the views about how the ministry can function successfully, and frankly, what its purpose must be. You know, a lot of Barbadians will tell you we're industry dead, but I think having listened to you today, there will be a clearer understanding of the extent to which it's not only not dead, but it is actually capable of thriving on this little island.
Senior Minister, I mean, to be quite frank, I couldn't think of a more exciting moment in the history of small island industry than now. The rate of advancement in machinery, in technology capacity that is no longer required as a super macro scale, but you can buy individual machines to help your workshop or help your small shop, or if you're a mechanic, the spray cans that you can use to automate things, or whatever programs to use. Your ability to do things now is transformational. So I think, if anything, we have to do a better job about wrapping up the excitement around the potential of industry. And as I said earlier, we're going to do a much better job in this coming year of telling stories of potentials, telling stories of opportunities from this ministry.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. Michael West.
Good afternoon, Minister and your team. As this is my first time speaking this evening, I would like to congratulate you and your team on the wonderful presentation that you have given us thus far, and for the work that you've continued to do in this ministry. As you said earlier, as you sit on the ledge of youth, I want to say that your youthful exuberance is very infectious. And I do think that most Barbadians, upon hearing your presentation today, will be very encouraged that you're doing excellent work in this ministry. With that said, I want to continue on the line of the questioning that my colleagues from St. James Central and from St. Peter engaged in as it pertains to standards. But I want to shift gears from the potholes of the roads and the highways to the drops and the outages of the information highway. I'm enthused by your ambitious agenda of strengthening e-governance across our ministry. Certainly, it's very important work to us and the public also. However, the success of your agenda, similarly like how energy and water are tantamount to data centers, the telecommunications infrastructure is important to your overall agenda. You know, it's very vexing to our grandparents when they're watching TV that the TV, the signal goes out, and they can't understand why the TV and the phone and everything is interlinked. And when you try to explain to them that it's just the efficiency in the way in which our telecommunications providers transmit data and it saves bandwidth, they don't care. They want to go back to the 80s and 90s when I had STV. But that is a vexing issue to them, but the truth is that it is a vexing issue when we have outages and drops on our cell phones. It does impact our productivity. So as a former engineer in the US, I could tell you that there are FCC regulations that govern how wireless carriers have to publish data. And they're required to report on things like signal quality, signal strength, drops, and outages. And this obviously provides the FCC with the information on how to compare the integrity of those carriers. And I just want to know from you, have you considered actually implementing something like this, which would constitute a method by which we can also measure standards? And I would just give you my follow-up one time. Have you also examined redundancies for the worst case scenario, saying which if we have an adverse weather system or if we have some fiber optic cables that are down? Thank you.
Minister, I love that question. And I don't love it because the problem you describe is personally vexatious to me, and members of the ministry would tell you, maybe twice a month in our manager meetings, I go very, I'll use a tough word, aggressive about finding a path to solving this problem and really stacking up our quality of service around our telecommunications capabilities as a fundamental that we can't slack on. So one, the estimates reflect an increase in budget on the infrastructure and the testing materials required to be able to manage quality of services. I don't think I'm putting out any tales out of school to tell you that as of now, the service providers provide reports, and they tend to say that they're surprised that if you have reports of the service dropping and they and they're surprised by some of the difficulties people seem to have. And I do the thing where I point out every single place I think you have problems: in the middle of the Bell, at the bottom of Lancaster, at the top of Top Rock, in the bottom of Westmoreland, and I could go on and on and on and on and on, right? And there is a series of places in the middle of Cave Hill, going up that hill. There's a series of places that we all know there's a service standard drop. And so I've said to the ministry, and our head of telecommunications is not here today, he's not well. But we have put in our budget a significant investment towards creating the equipment in terms of your sensors, your vehicles, your new professional services, additional and increased professional services, to make sure that the quality of service standard is monitored in a way so much more robustly than it is now. So that is a personal bugbear of mine, so you have my assurance of going after that. I like your idea of publicizing the information 100%, and I'll speak to you offline about that to see exactly how that was, and then get some ideas from you around that. I am fully on board in doing it. It's vexatious, but even more than vexatious, where we're going with the advancement of the digital economy requires a highly stable, highly bulletproof and quick telecommunications infrastructure. We can't play around with that. So I'm very, very strong on that. In addition to that, the question you asked, and Minister Humphrey's not here right now, but one of the things that we experimented on purpose with, for instance, is the creation of a sovereign 5G capability for the government. And we are in the advanced stages of that experiment, where we use, and it's super technical, but we use excess spectrum in the air using equipment and software to be able to create a sovereign 5G line effectively. And we've done so. And we're going to make it available to some of the critical service sectors of the government. But that could then extend to the public places such as your community centers and all those other things. So we are standing up a capability that previously didn't exist, that ensures that we get to places and have a reliability of service that is far better than what we have now. And I feel very strongly about it, so I appreciate the question, quite frankly.
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. George South.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm back again. I just want to, this is my last question for the day, hopefully. I just want to zoom in on an area of job creation. And, I've had some meaningful discussions with members of the team, BIDC as well as the minister. And I believe that this ministry, call it will mostly create high-tech, creative, and what I call innovative focused jobs. And whereas in some other areas that are designed to hire people, I think this ministry is meant to grow the economy through skills and technology, ecosystem. But I want to ask a question as it relates to the innovative initiatives and in terms of, the fear of the public saying to us that we talk a good talk, which we do, but we have actions too. But I'm asking you to tell us this evening, I know the hour is late, but tell us this evening, give us a breakdown if you can, of exactly what frontiers are you pushing to create jobs, like I mentioned, high-tech, the innovative technological base and creative jobs. It's a simple question, but it is loaded, and you understand where I'm coming from. For the fear of persons say, yes, we get in the ministry, we have, 20-something million dollars for Future Barbados, $33 million. But where are we going in terms of job creation? I know you have the answers, but I want the public to hear, what BADC is doing, Future Barbados, and this ministry on a whole in terms of job creations and the new frontiers that we are pushing.
Thank you, Mr. Sun. First thing, let me just correct. Future Barbados probably love to have $30 million, but they don't. But jokes aside, you framed it out as the ministry is going to focus on high-tech jobs, and there's some truth to that, right? There's going to be a percentage of the jobs that are going to be created are, in effect, going to be the first time some of these roles were ever had in government before. So solutions architects and advanced network engineers and AI and automation kind of roles and all types of things that didn't previously exist. And there'll be a need for those things over the next year or two or more. Cybersecurity, was sitting down to my left, is going to be hiring people in all types of roles that previously the ministry and the government and the country never needed, right? And there's going to be part of the infrastructure that the country requires around skills. And so there's going to be a lot of that. And in addition to the hiring specifically, our framework is already around creating opportunities. I gave a specific example earlier around, and I called his name, Christian Payne, I'll call it again. And we want more examples of that, where service providers and owners of small companies can be service providers and build things that then add new value. And so there'll be a lot of that, right? A lot of areas of focus around that. I've mentioned a number of times during this conversation that we're going to have to significantly increase the amount of dialogue and public education and engagement that we do. So content producers, creative persons, there's going to be a lot more of what we're doing. We have to engage with people not only via social media, we're going to have to engage in them physically. So you have event producers and performers and all types of different things. You're going to be creating a vast array of new, fresh jobs for a large population of young persons and new persons. But I wouldn't want the public to see that as only what the ministry does, because there's a fundamental component of the ministry that is driven by elements that already exist. So BIDC, through its orbit, probably has 400 to 500 different persons in its active employ, and from persons helping with custodian services to people on construction sites to people working in shops and all range of different things. There's just a vast array of work that's being created with this reindustrialization. As Mark Hill framed out, there's going to be the need for electricians and plumbers and engineers in a way that we've never had before, right? You're going to need welders, and you're going to need all types of different things, managing networks and skill sets that at a scale that you didn't need before, right? You're going to need people who are able to manage components of our build-out that you never saw before. Mark Boyce with GovTech spoke on the need of significantly ramping up the amount of people that are working for GovTech. So you're going to have people who are doing user designs and surveys, people who are asking people questions about their customer experience, people who are designing websites, who are graphic designers and motion designers. You're going to need a variety of skills that is a wide array of skills. It's not going to be not just high tech. And so our interest is really creating the catalyst And again, I just want to make sure the distinction is very clear that some of these jobs will be related to government hiring people, but our role is as a catalyst of pushing on private sector enablement for there to be a dynamic industrial and scientific and technological private sector that these jobs are available to Barbadians in the public space. We want to spur these things on so businesses feel that they are a place that they could set up their businesses and thrive from Barbados, and then the skills are available for them to hire into those places. So it's exciting. If you were asking me to drill down to a number, I wouldn't be able to drill down to a number. But the idea is to create certainly hundreds of opportunities this year and ramp that up over the next 4 years to 2013 to thousands of opportunities that are created from the work that we're doing. Sorry, I forgot a critical one. I mentioned a project before, which is Reclaiming Our Atlantic Destiny, and some of the members in here are intimately aware of it. That project alone, I think maybe like 150 people are working on that project, right? So from the digitization of it to kids working in the labs and building software programs to people managing the actual indexing and the clearing of it, and people who have in roles that never existed before. I have a personal experience of someone who was previously a nail tech, and they've been trained up to be a conservator of paper-based records that are 400 years old. And then you have the British Museum chief archivist coming to Barbados being blown away. Then how did you uptrain someone who was previously a nail tech, never dealing with paper-based records to the point where they can manage those things in a short period of time? So we're doing outstanding things here in the areas of new capabilities, and our role is to have a lot, just more and more and more of those.
Thank you, Mr. Minister, and through you, Chair. I did say that your ministry will not be focusing on harm people per se, but to grow the economy through the technological ecosystem. I did say that, but it is often good, and I mentioned in my previous intervention the whole notion of utilizing GIS, and I heard you know how I feel about you. I heard you just answered my question. But we can talk, you and I understand where we are going as a country, where we are going as a government. But we have to get this information to the public. And I think that is our weakness. You spent the day, sir, and I'm impressed, not only today, but before, since 2018 when I met you. But I don't think that the country knows what are the opportunities that will be presented to them, to the young people. And I think I am not critical of you. I'm very supportive of this ministry and this government. But I think that is one of the things that we have to improve upon, to let our young people know that there are opportunities out there through this ministry, not by you hiring, but by the use of the technology, the innovative and the technological ecosystem that you mentioned, whether it's through Future Barbados, it's through GovTech, it's through whoever. But I think you need to find that platform to allow the citizens of this country, the public, because you're not talking to Parliament, but you're speaking to the public. Right? We are sold on it already. And that is all I have to say, Mr. Chair. But I congratulate the ministry wholeheartedly on the work that you are doing, sir. Keep up the good work, you and your team. Blessings.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. These two related questions touch on and concern the way people, and many of the people who I represent, see life, so that the amount of technology and the advances in technology are often viewed with a certain degree of suspicion. There are people who always want to have a piece of paper because they don't trust that a system, a computer system, or internet-related system will always work, that is, it is reliable. There is also the matter of what happens if somebody hacks. So that the question I have for the minister and the ministry really is to speak directly to the people of Barbados, to give some level of assurance in the areas where there is still quite a lot of apprehension. That is to say, the area of cybersecurity, and I'm not asking you to divulge any sensitive information, but just that we keep hearing a lot about hacking in all kinds of places in the world and in our own country. And there are people who would like to hear from the ministry that you have systems in place, that you are comfortable, that we are as protected as we can be, that is in one situation. And I think a colleague earlier spoke to disasters. What happens if a hurricane passes through? Are we comfortable that we will have the information? There's still quite a number of Barbadians who remember the monkey and the electricity outage, and it is still referred to from time to time. On that day, very few people could work. And so these things come up as we engage with constituents, as we engage with others across the country. What is the ministry able to say to bring some level of comfort or reassurance or assurance to the people who may have these concerns?
Thank you for that, Minister. So a couple of things to that. I think the reality is that anything that new you're attempting, you have to acknowledge the fact that you are going on to a national journey, that you are starting at a certain point, and that you are taking as many people as you can along a journey. And the government is in the business of taking everybody along the journey. But not everyone is people are at different stages of their digital maturity, digital comfort, and so the work has to be done for people to feel a sense of comfort with where you're going. So first thing first, you have to meet people where they are. And as the CEO of GovTech indicated, one of the principal kind of philosophies of our approach is that you're going to have to make multiple modes of availability to people, but you show them the value in doing things in a digitally advanced way. So a simple example, of course, is with you. All of us have, bank accounts. You have an opportunity to do banking on your mobile phone now. You put up a phone to your face and you have face recognition, you do whatever transaction you want. You can choose to do so. But you can also choose to go in the line and wait and talk to your friend and spend some time and feel secure that this is the most solid way to do. You have the option to do such. And it's not going to be any different with how we transform the country's services going forward. You're going to give the public options of how they do things. Now, what you want to do is make the digital option the safest, the fastest, the most enjoyable, the most secure way of doing the thing. And that's really the work of the ministry. How do we make it, first thing first, when I think the year of better as I frame it before, I really think about competent. How do you make the transaction competent? How do you make it so that I close my eyes and know the thing was going to be done and it's solid, right? Next stage, I get the enjoyment and I get to delight and I get to all these things in terms of our experience arc. But the first thing is, how do you make it competent? And the truth is, a lot of the things that we've been doing over the years in our digital infrastructure hasn't been competent. So we have to build up a level of competency, and we're working very diligently on that. I spoke earlier before the state, and again, Ms. Rosil can dive in a little bit more, of where we are in terms of our cybersecurity maturity. And we're careful around how much we language around it, because these are obviously national security matters, and I wouldn't want to give it a score, but the reality is we are more secure than we are nowhere where we want to be, but we're certainly a lot more secure than where we were when we started 12 to 18 months ago. I was describing to Ms. Rosil, there was an incident that happened when I was Chief of Staff, and there's even the reporting mechanism at the time to know who was doing what and how they were doing it, et cetera, et cetera. There was no clarity about those things. There was no clarity of how we distributed information. How do we report back to a prime minister on a national security matter who was obviously the chair of national security? There was no clarity in those things. Now, we have clear pipelines of how we manage things. If there is a breach of a certain kind, we know what resides with the data commissioner as opposed to our head of cybersecurity, for instance, and we know how to manage those things. Quite frankly, I'll be careful what I say, but our ability to contain things has also become much more improved, that things can happen, and like they all do, in every sense of business. There are errors that are made and there are breaches that happen, but our ability to first thing first, very, very quickly identify something's awry, and then fix the thing, isolate it and fix it, is magnitudes better than it was 12 months ago, right? 18 months ago. I'm gonna call a wider timeline. So we've done some work and there's a lot more work to be done. Now, it's important, and it has to go beyond my voice, and certainly there needs to be a national campaign around that to understand that, as with everything, there are advantages to the advancement that we're going about, and there are going to be new risks that are brought forward as a result. We understand it. And there's a level of discomfort around those things. The idea of having one store of information that could be penetrated and you lose everything is the opposite of what we're trying to do. We're trying to create levels of redundancy that if something, for whatever reason, was penetrated or hacked or is down, that you have multiple stores of very secure redundancy and backups in a way that we've never had before, right? And so we're creating layers of redundancy that allows smooth transition where things are down in a way that we simply didn't have before. And that's compounded by the fact that, of course, that we're an island. We're in a hurricane zone, we're an island, and every single year, a couple times a year, we have fear of islands shutting down, electricity being down, the things that we were using before not being available to us. We are in constant threat of that a few days a year. So we need infrastructure that's designed for that. So our redundancies are our electricity, our redundancies are our telecommunication, our ability to use satellite data information in a way that we didn't use before to keep communication, our ability to have documents stored in the cloud and access in the cloud in a way that we didn't have before. These are the things that we're building out to be able to be effectively always on. You want how data centers are measured in terms of the tiers is an ability of having uptime. And so when you hear a tier 4 data center, it's a data center that's up for 99.9% of the time. That's what you're targeting. Systems that allow you to be up and have low levels of downtime so people can be free to do their business. And that's what we're building. Now, to get the country to believe it, we have to do more than say it. We actually have to build it. And it has to be real, and it has to be tangible, and it has to be part of their life, and they see the benefit of it. So what Minister Gibbs was saying about call dropping, we need to eliminate those things so people believe that we actually have the redundancy space and we're highly competitive and highly competent. What Minister Nichols was saying about not being able to use his driver license, we need to eliminate those things so people have confidence in the system and believe, yes, we can in fact do these advanced things. And that's the work that we're doing right now. So your concerns are fully part of what we think of the work every single day. We want to connect with impact. We don't want to do things just for the sake of ticking boxes and being shiny. Therefore, how do we get Barbadians to have a sense of confidence that the things work? And once they have a sense of confidence, then we could do some interesting and even more dynamic things. But the first step is really around how do we be highly competent in the work that we're doing. I don't know if Ms. Rosil, you want to add anything? I went on a little bit long, sorry. You don't want to add anything?
All right, thank you very much, Minister. I believe that those who are hearing, who are listening, will be assured. I like the fact that you indicated you use 99.9%, which speaks to 1 in 1,000 possibility of not working, so that we are realistic about systems, but can be assured that we are doing the best we can and improving all the time. I'm just hoping that what you've shared with us is embedded in the work of the ministry. And I say that only because, and I speak deliberately, carefully, the matter of redundancy, I know there have been at least one time in the past where we thought we had and we didn't. So that I just wish to say that not just at the level of the minister, but throughout the ministry, there has to be a serious appreciation of what a slip-up can cause for a country. And we have to understand that. I mean, we're not going back to paper, but we have to make sure that the systems we build are as whatever proofed as is possible. But thank you very much for your interventions and the interventions of your ministry, and I believe that many Barbadians will recognize that we are really moving forward and aiming for the gold, as my predecessor as Member of Parliament used to say. Thank you.
Minister, if I just add on to the end, is one of the, and I alluded to at the beginning of a lot of what we started in the first few months was really around firefighting and getting a lot further away from firefighting on a day-to-day basis and more thinking about strategy and long-term development. The reality of the work that this ministry is in charge of is that if an infrastructure, which is digital, is down for a microsecond, I know it instantaneously. If something is manual and is down, or analog and is down, you have a lag between the knowledge of the thing not working and it working. If it's digital, it's instantaneous. I know when the call dropped. I know when I couldn't get in my bank app. All these things happen instantaneously. So there's a pressure for the level of redundancy around digital platforms that there isn't in a way for analog platforms. And that's the burden that we have, and that's the responsibility that we have. And there's a direct relation between a country's ability to be resilient and have multiple versions of a thing, 2, 3 versions of a thing, with it being able to be prosperous, right? So we understand that we have a role to increase prosperity and using that to increase redundancy. So it's almost this virtuous cycle that we're trying to create. They empower us to have more redundancy and have more skills, 2 or 3 skills that we need, 2 or 3 of a system that we need, so that the thing never fails and to the point of having 99% uptime. We can only do that if you have a surplus of revenue to justify you having those things. And so that's the chicken and egg that we balance, and we are really much concerned with that, and obviously doing a rollout of services and a rollout of technologies that allow us to be both create new areas of revenue, create new areas of economic value to facilitate greater levels of redundancy and resilience.
Honourable Member of St. Michael Southeast.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do not report progress to His Honor the Speaker and beg leave to sit again.
Second that.
The question is that I do not report progress to His Honor the Speaker and beg for leave to sit again. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported progress and requests leave to sit again. Honourable Leader, Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until 5:15.
The question is that this honourable chairman be suspended until 5:15. All those honourable members in favour, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honourable chairman stands suspended until 5:15.
young guy say Andrew.
This sitting is resumed. We revert to the Standing Finance Committee and debate, the continued debate on the Appropriation Bill 2026.
This Honourable Standing Finance Committee is now resumed. Honourable Member for St. James Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I only have one last question from my end, and it's simply this, Honourable Minister. I think that you have adequately demonstrated your technical competence, but you are in a parliamentary setting, and obviously we are here as politicians. And I think I need to give you an opportunity to show your political side. In every constituency of this country, Minister, there are some people who perform an essential public service. And they are the most important in some ways, among the most important, but equally sometimes the most humble of our citizens. And these are folks who are often described just as roadside mechanics. But equally as they provide an important public service, there are those who, because of the nature of the communities in which they provide the service, will feel that those same people are causing public nuisances. In many constituencies, and mine is no exception, there are small streets where a line of cars will be found along the road, and what would otherwise be a two-lane road becomes one lane, and that lane of cars, vehicles that are there to be repaired. And that is true right across this island. And very often, the inconvenience is caused because you have, again, by virtue of the small country lanes, in many cases also the small urban lanes, situations where sanitation service vehicles cannot easily gain access to the community, emergency vehicles like ambulances and fire trucks cannot get access to the area, and that is where the vital service of the roadside mechanic can become something akin to a public nuisance. Now, I know that in 2024 or 2025, memory may be beating me here, but it's one of those 2 years, there was a motor mechanic bay which was opened, I believe, in Grisettes in St. Michael. But obviously, I'm being guided by the Honourable Member for the constituency. He tells me it's 2023, Mr. Chairman. And I want him to be accurate on that, so I am going to go with that. But the truth of the matter is that that is the only one that I know of. But the problem obviously is larger. And I think it may be correct to say that in that particular bay in Grisettes, there may be enough room for maybe as many as 10 motor mechanics, 10 bays. But the fact of the matter is that we have a problem which is island-wide. And I suspect that that problem, to be adequately resolved, is going to need something more than just that one solution. So my question really is, is there anything in the estimates for your ministry in this financial year that speaks to this solution? And even if it does not, if there are not such allocations, what is the plan of action of the ministry to bring this challenge to an end?
Thank you, Minister. I'll go narrow, and then I'll go wider in terms of your challenge of me as my political nous. So the simple answer is yes. in addition to obviously the industrial mandate, there's an expectation of the ministry to provide solutions to public needs. And some of those public needs are related to our ability to be a provider of a space where industrial type or industrial-like activities can happen, and certainly the mechanics bay is an example of that. I'll let the CEO of the IDC speak a little bit more about the plans, because the intent is, well, not the intent, the plan will be to build up much more of those bays across the country. Then I'll go wider after that.
Sorry. Thank you, Minister. So, in addition to the mechanics bay at Grisex, there's a plan to expand that bay to also take into account persons who are spraying and doing body work within communities. So, in addition to the Grisex bay, we also earmarked the space. The designs are complete, and we are hoping to accelerate that, the deployment of that bay in additional bay in six roads on 3 acres. So there'll be additional bay there in 6 roads. Also, we are procuring a 5-acre lot in Kendall and Christchurch, so that bay can serve more than just one parish. It's going to be a very big facility. We're in the process of identifying space. We thought that we had identified some space in the St. Michael area, but subsequent to that, the space is no longer available, but we are working to further expand the St. Michael needs. And in the north, we're looking at, in that northern corridor, also having a mechanics bay in that northern area as well. So we understand the need, not just in terms of car repairs, but also car storage, because one of the real issues, even at Grisex, that we found is that sourcing parts, for example. So a lot of cars that are in the island, a lot of parts may have to come from overseas, and it's taking around 3 weeks, 4 weeks sometimes to get parts in. So there's a lot of, in the existing bay, a lot of space is being taken up with cars that are being waiting to be repaired because they're waiting on parts. And so therefore we're looking at alternative stacking solutions so that we can park cars vertically to keep the bays and the footprint as small as possible. So this, we understand, is a critical part of development. We have a very well-developed motor racing sector as well, and it's coming back to sports. And in fact, the mechanics bays is very often used just before rally come up to prep and to prepare cars for rallying. So the need is great, and we are systematically seeking to meet that need with both designs that have been done in-house by internal designers and also to working with external designers. But what we're doing is sitting down with the mechanics, getting their feedback to improve on the design of the existing solution that we put on the table so we can continue to improve the experience for the mechanics. Thank you very much.
Senior Minister, just before you go, and so there's a consistent theme about how we think about our role in this impetus around digital development and reindustrialization, but I'll narrow in on reindustrialization. And I alluded to it before, but I'll drill down a little bit more. Seeing how you framed the beginning of the question is really around optimizing the parish economy. And different parishes have different needs. And some of those needs are going to be, or rather needs and opportunities. Some of those are going to be specific to geographical conditions. Some of those are going to be related to what traditionally was done in this space or advantages that they have. And some of them are going to be things on the basis of needs of large amounts of a problem that exists that we can find an industrial grade solution for, right? So in St. Michael, of course, there's the vast majority of where cars exist, parked, and therefore you'll have the vast majority of wayside mechanics and roadside facilitation on it. So we need to significantly beef that up. You know, that would also remain true also hold true for Christchurch and of course St. James, which you represent and I live. So the needs are, we are understanding that part of our role will become in providing industrial scale level solutions to localized problems. That goes beyond just cars, and I know you asked for that question, but you are aware of, we are engaging, for instance, in the market interruption strategy around food, right? So how can we position ourselves with the Food Science Center and a disaggregated attempt through markets and different providers to reach communities, to provide them with better options for cost-effective food choices through our industrialized processes. So we think a lot about that. We think a lot about how do we get into constituencies, how do we get into communities, how do we get into villages, and how do we affect people to ensure that their life is better with an industrial scale solution.
This is cool. Thank you, Minister. I do understand the approach given, the approach taken. I think you may have skirted, and perhaps unintentionally so, the when. And for those of us who are representing constituencies where the pain of the inconvenience to constituents is being felt. And there's a balancing act, because even as my constituents will speak to me about the inconvenience, there are obviously constituents of mine who are using the same motor mechanic. So, or mechanics plural. But because it is not in my constituency one or two cases, but more, I believe that it is an issue which certainly caused me to look around wider Barbados. And I was satisfied that I see a similar problem, and obviously I could not tell you to what degree, but I see a similar problem in almost every constituency that I have examined. And therefore, I think that you're confronted with a national issue that may require you to look at zones. And in an effort to make sure you adequately capture. I listened carefully to your explanation, and I genuinely feel that you come across as recognizing that St. Michael may have far more vehicles, which is probably true, and St. James and St. Philip. But the reality is that if I talk to the Honourable Member for St. George, North or South, I am sure they will tell you that they're experiencing the same challenges too. So it is perhaps useful to look at that approach. I want to take the opportunity, though, just to congratulate you on your team on the idea of storage of vehicles, especially if you're going to do it vertically, because it enables us to reduce the land demand that we have to have on these matters. But with those, I don't know if you want to speak to the question of when, though, because that is really the burning issue for most of us. How soon will we see more of these being rolled out?
Well, the ones that the CEO, thank you, Minister, the ones that the CEO Hill spoke about are within this financial year. So the intent was for those things to exist. The truth is, again, at risk of brainstorming in a public space, perhaps in a slightly dangerous way, when you were speaking, it gave an obvious path of thinking of a public-private partnership around build out of those things at a faster scale. There may be individuals who have land and the individuals who are in the business of doing body work and those things that can be partnered with for the purpose of creating those things in a way that's not entirely dependent on the government purse. So maybe, again, with the CEO being here, we'll do some work on challenging and see how we could scale up those numbers in a more expeditious way. But the ones that he mentioned are certainly expectations to happen within this financial year.
And certainly I think that is a useful approach for us to explore. And I am one MP who would not mind engaging with you in that type of conversation if you're looking to try to find people in the constituency to partner with. Because as I said, I suspect that it is a problem right across the island. I'm obliged.
Thank you, Honourable Member for St. James Central. We go to Honourable Member for St. Andrew, and at the end of his contribution and questions, Minister will come to you for the wrap-up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will not be very long. I actually wrote this question down early in the week, and I plan to ask it to another ministry, but I'm glad that I am here with the right persons now. This morning, Minister, one members of your team mentioned that they're working on standards to develop more resilient designs for our roads, and made the point that our roads are under tremendous pressure, more heavier trucks, more vehicles, and then you have the weather conditions. But my question this afternoon has to do with the existing building codes. Those codes would have been developed back in 2013, I believe, or so. And over the years, we have seen, really, as the climate crisis unfolds, we have really seen the evidence of really intense rainfall and climatic conditions that makes islands like Barbados a bit more vulnerable. My question is, what is the ministry, given certainly what happened in Jamaica last year with Melissa passing through and the damage that was caused over there, what are we doing in the ministry in terms of upgrading our standards, our building codes, to ensure that they reflect more modern climate resilient standards and best international practices?
Thank you for the question. I mean, it's an obvious one to hand over to Director Rind.
Thank you, Minister, and thank you for the question. What happened in Jamaica through Melissa was absolutely horrible. To watch it in the region, what it did do was highlight the importance of building codes, highlight the importance of code of practices for houses. So we engage with the regional experts in a code of practice called the CARICOM Regional Code of Practice for the Construction of Houses, which provides standards for building climate resilient homes in the Caribbean. The acronym for that is the CRCP10, and is really a regional building code or standard, which was developed by the regional partners in conjunction with the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, we know that as SEDEMA, as well as the CARICOM Regional Organization for Standards and Quality. Now, this particular code, we did extensive work on it, and it was one of the suite of standards which we were able to adopt nationally in our Gazette. So it is now a national adoption for construction of resilient homes. We were pleased to do that again through our minister present and our ministry. Now, it sets out the guidelines and the best practices for constructing safe and durable houses. And this is across CARICOM countries. So the goal is really to improve the resilience of homes against natural hazards, against climate change, such as hurricanes that you would have seen, floods, earthquakes. It even covers extreme heat. So many homes in the Caribbean, I would go as far to say we are aware that, they're built informally. Many of them don't really follow the proper engineering standards. And in part, that's why we introduced the CRCP10 to our national adoption, to make sure that we standardize the construction practices across Barbados. It's a regional standard, so by extension, the region. We're hoping to reduce the damage from hurricanes and the damage from disasters through this standard. And it's really set to improve the safety and durability of our housing stock. We have fashioned, and we're about to roll out in this upcoming financial year, an initiative called the Top Quality Building Program. Top Quality Building Program, and this is out of the BNSI, where there are elements of the CRCP10 that will be included, and any teams of contractors who can be assessed and show that they demonstrate the requirements within the initiative. We give them a nice quality mark, make it visible, so that eventually the public gets to understand the stock of qualified, competent contractors, where you would take great comfort knowing that an investment like a home, you wouldn't want to think that it's just a team of put together men that you're entrusting hundreds of thousands of dollars to. So we're really excited about this program being rolled out through our ministry this year. And it really will provide guidance on structural design, building materials, roof and wall construction, the majors in terms of our considerations for homes, foundation and site preparation, but more importantly, the resistance to hurricanes and extreme weather patterns. We have inbuilt climate resilient features as well in that particular code of practice. So I will invite any extension of your ministry to further information. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you so very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. You have 5 minutes to wrap up and move ahead.
Thank you, Chair. First thing first, thank you for the colleagues all for the attention and the participation. It's enjoyable. Some of the queries and the ability to articulate some of the work that the ministry has been doing showed us that in many ways I think that we are on the right course. There's some things that some course correction and further development that we must do. I take fully on board the need for us to better articulate, engage, share the excitement and the work that's been doing with the public space, and in a way that translates to the public space in a way that our intent is intended. And that is, and that's important, and that's a lesson well taken. And also I take that there's a balance of a mix between potential and excitement and anxiety and fear around this digital transformation, and that we are the ministry that's charged with the responsibility of leaning that ticker a lot more towards excitement and opportunity as opposed to the fearful nature of it. And to do that is going to be a combination of being highly competent, a combination of doing solid work that people can trust and feel consistent with, as well as sharing with the public in a transparent manner. So that has been very well received. We've been very clear about our intent for the work that we're going to do this year. What we've shared today, myself and the team, has been in direct relation with our plans. We didn't cram for a test. We told you what we've done and what we intend to do, and we're pleased that has been well received. And from our internal perspective, our intent is to be a ministry that is much more competent, much more of a team player, much more reliable, much more in a position to drive this technological and digital transformation that the country demands of us to do. And to Minister Humphrey's point and Director Mosley's point, to be a place where ingenuity and excitement and experimentation can happen from. And to other colleagues' point, to be a space where we optimize the quality of human life while using technology to its fullest. So we understand that. So many of the questions have been around standards, which was a little bit of a surprise to me, but it's great. Because ultimately, if we are to achieve this status of becoming world-class, now world-class is a standard. And so we have to set benchmarks, we have to set targets, we have to put infrastructure and monitoring devices in place and people in place to make sure that every single day we take a step further to the target that we set and we don't regress. So that has been extraordinarily well received, and there will be a reflection of how we do our work in the next year that reflects that. Also well received from Minister Jordan's the idea of redundancy and talking through and actualizing redundancy, especially in an area where people have so much trepidation about what gets lost in case digital systems fail. Again, that was very well received. But although we spoke a lot about the ministry, the reality is that the work that we talked about today is really not about transforming and reforming the ministry. It's really around kind of imagining and building the future of Barbados, and a future where we become this global digital hub and this global innovation hub a place where public services are simple and fast and human-centric, a place where investors, both local, regional, and global, feel very safe in putting their money, and their money works for them with a level of certainty and a level of high return, and a place where the next generation of Barbadians and human beings, quite frankly, see great opportunities for them in the areas of innovation, science, and technology. And we are wholehearted with our desire to make that a reality. It's going to take effort, it's going to take work. There'll be mistakes that are going to be made along the way. We'll try to limit those as much as possible, and we'll be transparent and honest with the lessons learned. And the idea is, how do we then engage as many partners as possible, individuals who are highly talented, young startups, the third sector entities, global academic institutions. How do we engage with people and entities that share our values to move towards this better Barbados at a faster rate than we could imagine? And so our mandate is clear. We are thankful for the support of the Cabinet and the Ministry of Finance with an increased budget that has come with, of course, a increased mandate. And the intent is to deliver on the things that we've promised to deliver on. So with these words, Mr. Chair, thank you so much. Oh, apologies. I move that head 31 stand apart.
The question is that head 31 stand apart. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it. Honorable member for St. Michael Southeast.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I beg to move that you do now report progress to His Honor the Speaker and beg leave to sit again.
I beg to second.
The question is that I do now report progress to His Honor the Speaker and beg for leave to sit again. All honorable members in favor, say aye. Honorable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman has reported progress and requests leave to sit again.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the House until Friday the 13th at 10 a.m.
The question is that this honorable chairman be suspended until Friday, the 13th day of March 2026 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Meeting the ayes have it. This honorable chairman stands suspended until Friday, 13th of March 2026 at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.